Hello and welcome to episode 177 of the Imperial Truth. My name is Greg and I'm here with Howard as usual. Hello, Howard.
Hello, Greg. How you doing? You all right?
Yeah, not too bad. You might sound my voice has just suddenly got worse in the last 5 minutes, which is always fun.
He's
But
definitely putting it on for effect, just to really show
yeah,
how ill he is. Really, like calling in sick. It's one of those. Oh no, I'm managing to struggle through.
yeah.
To be
You
fair,
hit.
it's a change. It's a change for you to have the cold rather than me.
I don't know about that, but yeah. So I had it and then it went, and then I got something else, and then that went, and then this cough. I think I might have that cough that's going to stick around for a long time. But hey,
Yeah.
it is
Welcome to
what it is.
welcome to Winter 24.
We're just two Warhammer heroes powering on. That's all we are. We don't need a
We're the
badge to tell
heroes.
us that.
We're the heroes that everyone deserves. Clearly.
Yeah, yeah. We're heroes in our own minds.
That's
So, excellent
what
stuff.
my wife keeps telling me.
Before we go anywhere, Element Games for all your plasticky goodness and all your paints and airbrushes and other game systems. They do exist, and movement trays and other stuff with venues in Manchester, or Stockport, should I say? Sorry, apologies, Stockport.
Ooh.
Near Manchester, Nottingham, Sheffield, and a new one opening up in
Oh,
Birmingham area.
really? I didn't know that. Oh, cool.
Yeah, desperately waiting for them to come further south, but
Come on, London store. Come
they're
on.
getting there, or even further, somewhere respectable, not London, like
Somewhere
home
that doesn't
counties.
bankrupt you.
Thank you.
Mm.
Yeah, uh, yeah, proper southeast. But yeah, you can. They can provide you with all your goodies. Now, I did say they were going to do like the old world at reduced price. One thing Element don't every now and then with some of their big releases they don't do them at discount, but they also didn't have them online either at that point because of lack of stock availability, which is what it is. I just like to be upfront and honest. So if you are, if they do a big release like that, again, there is a chance that they don't give you the discount on the main product. But
They
hey,
have been quite straightforward. I think that's to their credit, where they will give a message as early as they possibly can, saying, we're not getting the stock allocation. This won't be available online from us. Rather than it
Yep,
being a
and
bit
that's fair enough.
oversold. And you do see that occasionally, where some people will promise that they can get it and then they don't,
Mm.
and it takes forever and it's on back order, and you're like,
Yeah, the main reason I mention it is because they normally don't announce that they're not doing discount. So, and
okay,
as someone who's telling people go to Element Games,
yeah, that's
just
fair.
to be aware, but sometimes with their big releases, their Heresy box, 40k, I can't remember. I think they did it with 40k. I think they had
I think
enough.
they did, because I don't
But
think the
yeah,
stock was too much of a problem.
no, there's been a few where they haven't done it,
Mm.
but generally you're getting 20% off in that pre-order period, which is 2 weeks now for everything. And you are getting your stuff from them, at least from their side of things, in a timely order. Whether they're getting it from Games Workshop in a timely order is a completely different issue and not Element's fault. So, yeah, they've been supporting the podcast for a long time. So thank you to Element, they do great stuff. And yeah, good shop, good shops.
Definitely would
The two
recommend
that
that
I've been in.
anyone visit there, particularly the Stockport one. Is a bit of a legendary store. I was very impressed, having done a pilgrimage to a number of stores around the world. That was remarkable, that one. So if anyone's in the region, I'd check it out.
All good. Wonderful stuff. Howard, you been able to do any hobby, any gaming related things? Any?
Legions Imperialis has continued to be there, painting infantry for that scale, which it was how I started my experiences of this hobby. Returning
During
to
the
painting
war.
that scale, um, goodness me, it's a challenge, because there's enough detail and cool stuff on those models, and when you're seeing people paint all sorts of things, you're like, yeah, challenge accepted. I can do that. I'm going to paint the studs on these shoulder pads of these tiny models. Whew, that is an undertaking. So yeah, that's been what I've taken on. I've done a couple of the packs of the Marines and done the infantry for those. As mostly Blood Angels, but a bit of Imperial Fists. Imperial Fists are particularly good at that scale because it's such a bright color scheme, or can
Mm.
be. But did enjoy it, and it did give you a good sense when you see them all on a base, on their bases and lined up. You're like, actually, this is looking pretty cool. So I've enjoyed some of that and getting ready for Beachhead, which is coming up rapidly.
Oh,
Um,
don't. Yeah.
just trying to get a few games in of that. Little training games with a teammate, and trying just building the one or two bits. I've chickened out, and I'm going with the same list as I took the last time, but with a few tweaks. So yeah, a little bit to do that. Actually, been spending a bit of time making things like cards, printing out weapons cards
Oh
and
yeah.
printing out
I need.
stratagem cards and stuff like that, which I found, particularly stratagem cards. I just forgot last time that I had certain stratagems. It's
Oh,
like having the
good
cards in front of
lord.
me would be useful.
Yes, I need to work that one out. Yeah, I'm going to Beachhead as well. We are going as team insert name here. Uh,
Yeah,
we have
team to be
various
decided.
options. Some
Yeah,
of them possibly not going to get used. Um,
some of them
uh,
tempting. Might be a bit on the nose.
Also, this might be a safer work podcast, but I have a tendency to be less safe for work offline. So you know, there might be some interesting ideas there. But yeah, I was supposed to go to a heresy event end of the month, end of January, and um, at this thing I just wasn't 100%. Didn't want to, and big time didn't want to go and make everyone else ill. Um,
Mm.
I wasn't really feeling it either, so decided not to, and use that time instead to try and read End of the Death Part 3, which we'll get into much later on. But yeah, to try and get that finished before any major spoilers, because there were some real cretins out there with
Yeah,
heading out
I
spoilers.
did start being a bit careful with the social media on that one. So
Luckily,
I've unfollowed a few YouTube
right.
channels and
Oh, yeah.
things, and just like I can't risk this.
I mean, yeah, we'll talk about all that
Yeah.
later and that will be. I don't think there's any way we can talk about this book without. We can't do a normal like review. Doesn't. I mean, if people are going to, but at the end of the day, like in terms of non-spoilery reviews, if you've read the series, you're going to read it, and if you haven't, why are you reading
Mm,
it? And you know, and if
mm,
you just want the details, then you probably got to found them out anyway. So we will be spoiling all that later on. But so I've spent like the weekend, like with the boy, with the missus, and reading a few late
mm.
nights, doing other stuff. I have done very little hobby, which is a bit frustrating. It's been a bit all over the shop, but that needs to change. So my January like target was never met by quite a margin, but that's fine because we had that discussion last time. I know that's going to happen. I did get some paint on some Legions Imperialis. I was supposed to pick them
I
up
saw
off my
those.
mate last week, and he forgot to bring last night. He forgot to bring them to club, so I have got a box full of more stuff to do, like Thunderhawks. And I just dug out my aeronautical bits that are going to go in there, and
Mm.
that as well. But I'm not going to be working on them for 2 weeks anyway, or a week and a half, because I've got Beachhead, and I've got to actually go and see what state of the list that I've chosen is actually ready to go,
Yeah.
because not a lot. Uh, but it'll
You
be
did send
fun.
me a message saying the list you had in mind had just broken because you like, oh, it doesn't quite fit in the list now.
I
Damn.
yeah, I was like, I had this real, don't write many AT lists. And I was like, I've been having so much fun using this list, the last list I played a couple of times, and realised we must have been playing 1850 or 2000 points, and it won't fit in a 1750 at all. And it was like, oh,
Yeah.
uh, it's kind of what I want to play, and I'm like, does it work? Can I get away with it? Yeah. And then I was like, do I care?
Yeah.
Nah, it's
Yeah.
fine. Like we'll just
I'll
change the
get
weapon
close.
options. Right? Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll have a
Yeah.
double. I'll have a double um, ranged warhound taking down the warhound with two ranged weapons taking down shields. That's fine. Like I'll sacrifice some of the good stuff just to be
Yeah.
able to put that on the table. So yeah, so Beachhead is my one. Realistically, I've got about a week to get stuff done for that
Yeah.
to a level I can use it and make some stratagem cards. Make sure I've got the right stuff and all that as well.
I reckon
And the weapons cards.
I can probably sort you out there.
Yeah,
Give me a well. You have to give me a list.
yes, I do. I have to decide what stratagems to take. I
Yeah.
started trying to work
Exactly.
that one out. I was like, oh, this is effort. So much effort. I was like, I'm playing Old World at the club the other night, and I was like, this is so much easier. Like,
Yeah.
just They have to like have cards around and things and what have you. I can just make a
What
2,000
what
point
force
chaos
did
list
you?
with it.
What army
Or is
did
it
you take?
chaos?
If you oh right,
Or is it chaos like my old school army? I was like, yeah, I've got some Brett bits. GW sent me some Brett bits, which I need to work on. But I was like, okay, just trying to get the rules in. 2,000 points of Warriors of Chaos. Don't have many models. I have to proxy some stuff. I can take a dragon, 2 other characters, a giant, and about 25 models and make 2,000 point army.
nice.
Like, yeah, interesting game. Yeah, it's great to be playing like old world again, Warhammer. Getting used to the hero hammers back. Like, boy, is the hero hammer back. But
Oh really? Right. Okay.
oh
Cool.
yeah, I think my Chaos Lord on Dragon took 4 wounds all game
Okay.
and saw off a fair bit of stuff. So
What were you playing
yeah, orcs
against?
and goblins.
Okay. Cool.
And the stuff he took wounds from was like Mangler Squigs and Fanatics did wounds, and the old Chaos Knights, just rolling a 1 every now and then. But yeah, no, it was a yeah. There's more to it than that, and there will be more to it than that. But it's big flying characters is a thing for sure, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's the kind of game it is. But I'm
So you
looking
got
at
games.
selling.
You got games in then, which is good.
Try and get a game in every Tuesday because hobby's my lesser my definitely my third part of my 3 axis of playing, reading, and hobbying.
Yeah, not bad. Well, at least you got
So
those in, even if the rest of it was not quite what you wanted it to be. But that's fine.
yeah, the problem is it's just relentless, isn't it? So Beachhead's done. I probably need to then think about the next event I'm going to because I think I've got to paint a lot of space walls probably for that. So I need to like write a list, get a list sorted. I might even take Rust just so it's less to paint. Um, yeah, that kind of thing. Really play the system on it. And meanwhile, there's always stuff coming out, isn't there? So it's like
There is.
that excites you more than whatever you're painting at that current moment in time. So,
Speaking of which, the news.
well, no, not yet, because we have a break
What?
before we do that. We have a break
Oh,
now before we do all
there's a
that.
whole system, isn't there? Yeah.
There is a system. So yeah, just for those aware, we are at Beachhead. So there's various other game systems. If you are there and you want to come over and say hello, we haven't got a team name, but we will put that on socials at some point, I'm sure. And we're down there playing AT. I know the bloke running the Age of Sigmar event. I listen to the guys playing the Blood Bowl who run the Blood Bowl event. So I'm going to wander around anyway. So
The
yeah, well,
Heresy. I went over and had a good look at the Heresy games being played because there's a Heresy event there. I don't know for certain if there is this time, but there was last time, and
I
it
think
all
there
looked
is.
amazing. They had a really good looking set of games being played and really nice armies, as you'd expect. Big 40k, big-ish Age of Sigmar.
Yeah,
Star Wars Legion is there in force. There's a load of game systems being played at this thing. It's big.
yeah.
All run by Entoyment down there. There's
They're
the
open
store that's down
gaming
in
on the
Poole.
Friday night, Friday afternoon. Is it?
Not that I doubt it, frankly,
Okay, so just
because
hanging
I
out.
don't think they've got the I don't think they've got the hall
It's
because it's a
corner.
convention centre thing. I think it's all locked
Friday
down and opened up now.
might just be pub.
It is. There are there is a planned meetup on the Friday night and the Saturday night, which is talked about on the Maximal Fire Discord, I believe, is where the details of that are, or at least are being tentatively thrown around. So yeah, hopefully that'll be
There's
that.
lots
But
of
I mean,
pubs
that's
though.
specific to Bournemouth. Not too hard. Yeah,
Yeah, right. Yeah, we'll see where we end up. Okay, cool. Yeah, because I can't talk about reading because we're going to talk about that later. Done a bit of hobby.
that's a big conversation this particular month.
I think we might just leave that one there. He says as he tries to get on the right bit of his computer to do that.
All
Wonderful.
this seamless behind the scenes stuff.
Okie dokie. So we've got plenty to talk about in the news, as
Yeah,
usual.
there has been a lot actually.
It does seem
Feels like there's been
relentless,
quite
doesn't it?
some biggies as well. It feels like.
Indeed. Should we go through it in order? So very shortly after recording, we got the announcement of the previous episode that Horus Heresy Warhammer, the Horus Heresy Legions Imperialis, The Great Slaughter, is coming out, which is a book which ties into Peter Garman. And specifically a focus on how to pronounce it, Nurcon City,
I've always on Neocon, but yeah, not Neocon, something like that. Neocon, yeah.
Neurocon. So we have new formations and detachments for loyalist and traitor forces. So things like Vanguard detachments for your fast stuff, things like that. Drop pod assaults. Can't talk tonight. Apologies. We have new, obviously, the units that can go with those as well. And then we have a conquest campaign,
Yes.
and we also have Titan Death,
A
which
game
is
mode, yes.
game mode, which is about bringing Titans. So uh, I still think they're making, well, not making Adeptus Titanicus is still a play mode. I don't think this is going to replace it.
No.
It's probably just a middle house, as it were,
Oh, it's a
on that
to
one.
me, it's a totally different.
Yeah,
It's a totally different type of thing. Here, it's about large numbers of stuff. Like you're going
exactly.
to take a much larger number of titans in that.
Someone
Six
said to me,
thousand points of epic.
why don't why don't you just play like big games of 18? It's like, have you ever played a
Yeah,
big game of 80?
exactly.
A, there's just so much going on. B, Titans don't get to move because there's so much firepower they get destroyed.
Mm,
Which when that takes a little while is, and then whole games like can fold quite easily on that. So
yeah,
it appears to be very much about you want to use lots of models. Well, this is the way to do it.
yeah,
So
exactly. It's a different way of playing
yeah,
a different type of game, frankly. And I think, yeah, I'm excited to see that.
Apocalypse Titanicus, basically.
That's
So
kind of the linking I was thinking.
yeah,
But yeah, that's a good analogy. It's
yeah.
not
In terms of
Apocalypse. It's
get
not
loads of models
Apocalypse
down.
Legions either.
No,
Yeah.
get loads of models down and be able to use them. Yeah, it is limited to Titans and Knights. So I
Yes.
think existing collections of Knights and Titans.
It's
That's
not. It's not
cool.
super heavies. Yeah.
And also, it's like really cheeky from GW. Well, it's not cheeky. It's quite sensible. I thought you play Legions Imperialis. Well, here's a way you buy some more Titans, and then you've got
Mm.
all these options, and then you can use them in this game. And then you've got a Titanicus army. You could just go and get these, and all of a sudden you're playing that. So
I think it's a
that's
really smart book. I
yeah,
was really excited when they announced this. It feels like a really every part of it I'm interested in, and I think it just sounds like a really exciting book the way they put it together. There's a load of really cool history. We haven't had Beta Garman described in a book such as this, like a campaign book. More on that later.
no.
But
Well,
we hadn't
in
before this,
fact,
and yeah,
let's link that through because
mm,
one of the latest pieces of news is the Heresy is getting the Battle for Beta Garman as a campaign book. Um, uh, in the style of Siege of Cathonia, and
yeah.
full of lore of the years of blood and death.
Well,
What
and
are we getting?
similarly, that book, as announced, also sounds packed full of really interesting stuff. And the
Yeah,
fact that they sort of got these two books for the two different games at different scales, describing them in different ways, and this one also sounds packed with really interesting stuff. There's no, it doesn't appear to be much filler in these things. I mean, these feel like, and this is the battle for Beta Garman for the for 28 mil. Not that we even use that term anymore. Is a chunky old book. It's a big old beast by the looks of it.
yes. So
Yeah.
within this, you've got the backstory, the Onslaught campaign system, quick-fire string of connected games to like. It's quite a nice way to have campaign systems that are quite snappy. And then on top of that, you've got rules for Shattered Legions and Black Shields as playable
Mm,
factions. So whether they're handled more like the militia and the solar auxiliary and the demons, more than the legions, who knows? But I expect it's fed off the legions because of the nature of what they are. But no, I mean, in terms of like the other ones are obviously there's an inconsistency between them and the main forces a little bit. But yeah, that's super cool that we're getting that. It allows, there's people out there with armies who've not wanted to play them because they're built as either Shattered Legions or Black Shields, which is cool. Advanced players can use these rules to customize their army to an unparalleled degree. We'll see. We'll see how well that stacks up as we get there, I suppose. So yeah, I quite like it's, the the image of the Black Shields they got painted received mixed reviews. I kind of
Oh, I
like it.
didn't see that. I didn't see many
Yeah,
comments on it, but yeah, I thought it was just cool that they had it, that they had some sort of image of that. Similarly, the mixed Shattered Legions forces I thought looked quite cool.
yeah. So let's get this right. So the Shadow Legion's forces are ad hoc armies composed of troops from many different legions, salamanders, raven gods, nine hands, and more, mixing together even within individual squads, which is quite a different way, potentially, who knows, of doing things. And then you get those options. And then Black Shields have a more cohesive structure, can be used to represent the many independent warbands that prowl the galaxy. It can be customized by selecting two oaths, which set a distinct framework around which the war band is built, granting additional war gear options or abilities. So much like the provinces for militia, things like that. But this image, I quite like the gold and black. I think it's quite
Mm,
cool. There were some like people trying to be funny. It's like, oh yeah, these world eaters guys. It's like the whole point is they might not be world eaters.
mm,
Like they might just have gone, my helmet's damaged. I'll have that one.
mm.
That works, and yet they might be world eaters, and it's just like, oh, it works. It's fine.
Yeah, I thought it
So
looked cool. It's just here you go. You can do variant color schemes and do your own thing.
yeah,
You
yeah,
can do your own color scheme you want to do. Yeah, ideal. Own little
and mix
rogue
your
warband.
iconography up as well, and
Yeah,
all
yeah.
kinds. Go hog wild with those as well. And then we're going to get rules for Little Horus Axmund, Tybalt Mar, Shadrach Meduson, and Endred Har. There we go. And rules for the Athenon Heavy Sentinel.
Because there was a few people saying where are the rules for that when that was shown off, and we'll come to that in a minute. But the community said, yeah, Warhammer community said, when we know, we'll tell you. And then this was
Here we
announced
go.
that quite a bit
But I
later.
mean,
But yeah, here it is. Yeah.
even if they just dropped it on a PDF like they used to, for those who don't know, word
Mm,
around, we used to get drops of stuff, and every now and then there'd be something completely new, and they'd just give you the rules on the PDF until
yeah.
it was put in a book, and it's like, there'll be a way. Like,
Yeah, you'll be
that's
able to
like,
use it. Yeah.
it's not a worry for me in any
No,
way, stretch of
obviously
the
people are not people. It's not a worry as such. I think people were just curious to see where it was going to come, and
Well, I
then
think
that
for
was the
some people
answer.
it is a worry. I think for some people, like their go-to is like, "Oh my god, how are you going to do this?" And maybe that's just a character trait, or maybe there's a
Mm.
distrust of GW, or maybe just I don't quite know, but I find it a little bit tiresome
I can see the
because there is a
criticism of
difference between
having.
what you're saying and what I've seen sometimes, and I've seen both.
Hmm, I could see a criticism of having it to play an army. You've got to be across multiple books, and you've got to take a whole bunch of them.
Oh, yeah,
But
absolutely,
I can see
absolutely.
that being a thing. But there are ways to mitigate that. Having your own sort of cheat sheets and things that's workable. Um, should you have to? Yeah, different conversation, isn't it? Cool news about the characters, though, because given the way these publications go in recent years, you won't typically get rules for something that won't have a model.
I've seen this said again a few times. Um, Games
Might take a
Workshop
long
have
time.
Games Workshop have given us the old world with a whole PDF of stuff which they've basically said we've got no intention of making.
I feel the old world is a bit of an anomaly compared to the other
A
games where
smidge,
they do stuff like that
but
because of its legacy nature.
however, it's still Games Workshop giving you rules that they don't provide models for,
Fair enough.
and we don't know intent, and that's one thing. We never
So I
know
say
intent.
it's not a rule that they would
Mm.
do it that way, but it tends to be now that in publications of major games in particular, or in fact any game really, but Old World is a good exception.
We've got
You
big
don't tend to
PDFs.
get rules.
We've got a huge PDF here in Harris Heresy of models that don't have rules, rules that don't have models.
But this is going to be a published book. I think
This one is, but we
we'll likely
have.
see models for this.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. I'm not saying we won't, but the statement of not making rules for things they don't have models for. There's so much stuff we have rules that they don't have models for. They don't sell models for. So much stuff. I think when it
What
goes into a book,
are you challenging that statement because you see that statement as a criticism?
no, I just think it's inaccurate.
Yeah, okay, but I think it is. I think it was something even they acknowledged. I think I asked a question about it once. One of the weekenders saying, "Would you ever consider releasing a load of the sketches and things, all the ideas of these things?" And they said, "Well, no." At the time, because that might lead to people producing third parties producing models. I mean, that was that was a long time ago, but I thought that was part of the thing. If they didn't want to release models, didn't want to release rules for things because they couldn't keep up themselves. Whereas I feel like in these in these major publications, like we'll see here, I think it's mainly it's an alternative way of saying I think we'll see models of this.
Yeah. But I was responding to the other thing. The major difference between the chapter house rulings effect was that was one of the prime highlights of that was a tyrannid model. We're talking about various forms of space marines, which are already protected by nature of having other forms of space marines. So you can put out a rule for a heavy weapon space marine team without models because we know what heavy weapon space marine team is, even though this one's different and will be different if they ever get around to making rules of it. We might have lost a bit of recording now, we might not. I'm not going to go back over it. Great Slaughter's coming out, has a lot of potential. The Shattered Beta Garment's coming out, has a lot of potential. Super cool and out soon. That's what we know.
Yes, and really
All
looking
good.
forward to both of those. I think they're going to, and as companion volumes, however and whenever they come out and in whatever order, I think they're going to. That's really cool that they're doing both at a similar time frame. So we'll see it from sort of
Indeed.
two different perspectives. So
Cool.
should we jump back to the LVO?
Yeah, actually, I haven't got the. How did I not put the LVO stuff up? Is it because. No, that's because there's stuff that happened before the LVO. We got told that we're getting plastic harvests. That's an interesting one when the resins were available.
Plastic? What? Sorry.
Harvest lighters.
Harvestitis. Okay, that I thought that was after, but anyway, yes, that is exciting, as you
No,
say,
that was
because
the
it's
11th of January. Yeah,
I'm
but it was
looking at the
interesting that
announcement. How foolish of me. Yes.
the
Okay.
resins for these weren't that long ago. It feels, and now there's 8 in
No,
plastic. I'd be a
albeit,
bit annoyed if I
yeah,
bought some resin ones,
yeah,
but hey, it is what
yeah.
it is. But the solar definitely need, and Imperials definitely need an ability to get around the board. So you know, hey,
Good to
I think
have.
they're cool. Yeah,
I'm slightly surprised, like you. I thought they were going to stay in resin. I'm pleased that they've done them in plastic, and 8 in a box is quite cool. They're nice because they're sort of quite small, aren't they? Yeah, another nice unit to have for legions.
indeed. Let's jump then to the LVO. Actually, no, tell a lie. Before the LVO, we got some Blood Angels upgrades.
We did. Also, a bit of a surprise. I wasn't expecting
They're a bit out of the blue, aren't they?
a Legion specific armory set, which I suppose after the Sons of Horus does make sense. We're going to see other legions, of course.
Yeah, I can
But I'm
imagine we're going to
surprised
get
we got.
these.
Yeah, I'm surprised we got a Blood Angel one.
So, how many spare bolt guns are you going to have once you've got 10 assault cannons for your
I
Blood
mean, it's
Angels?
crazy, isn't it? I found that a really bizarre decision. I would have thought put 2 or 3 surely in the set. Yeah,
So
I
what
found
can
just
happen?
one in there.
Anyone? It's anyone who can have a heavy flamer, isn't it?
Yeah, anything with a heavy flamer.
Which, because it's heresy, isn't one man in 5, is it? It's the whole squad.
It's also not just that; it's also the Angel's Tears can
Yeah.
take them. So Angel Tears and anything with a heavy flamer. So you can have a whole heavy support squad with them,
Yeah.
and you can have Angel's Tears with them, and they are popular in both, but particularly with the Angel's Tears.
But at least you're gonna have lots of bolt guns to choose from.
Well, quite, yeah, yeah.
Although
30,
some
30
left and
fancy
some
bolt guns.
right-handed.
Mm,
That's cool though. I quite like that.
yeah,
And you at least get your Inferno pistols as well, and a pointing arm.
yeah, they're handy.
Pointing
I
arm's
do
always
like.
good.
I like all of the. Yeah, I like all of the close combat weapons. I thought they were all quite nice.
Yeah.
I thought it was a
Uh,
cool idea as well of the way they've made them flaming weapons. I thought it was fun. You got the little blood drop
hmm.
symbol etched into the blade, which is actually a way of having these things ignite. I thought the flame projectors. That was quite fun. And then a separate kit for assault cannons on vehicles.
But not as sponsons.
New.
I don't know. I don't know what can still have like heavy flames. It's not an option I look at a great deal, to be honest. Um, cool. It's a bit. I can imagine it being a bit frustrating if you want to get a lot, but
It
especially
does
because
specifically say it's the Predator upgrade pack, but like you say, it doesn't have the sponsors.
yeah, Predators can have sponsons, can't they? Heavy weapon flame sponsons. I
They
think.
can,
Yeah, I can't
they
remember.
can, because I think it's on the plastic
Yeah,
sponson frame.
but you're also people are going to take these to put on other stuff as well.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, just looking particularly at the weapons upgrades. Um, the 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 biggest problem with wanting 10 of those assault cannons is the weapons are very distinct.
Mm,
Like, sort of works against buying loads and using them on other projects. But
mm,
it is what it is. People will find ways around it.
yeah.
I'm sure. They look cool. I'll give them
Yeah,
that.
it would have just been quite nice if the assault cannon was in a pack on its own, or
Yeah,
had more
or a
of them in the
smaller
set.
pack. Yeah, or yeah,
Yeah.
or some different way of doing
Mm,
it. Cool. But then we do get to the LVO
yeah,
solar auxilia.
we do, and that was the much rumored
Hmm.
Solar Auxilia, and they
So
went to town, didn't they?
yeah, so the battle group, much like the Heresy battle group, the Mark III battle group will be around while it's around. What do you get again? You get a Dracosan, a Russ, the new Walker Command Squad, and is that 20 dudes?
Yeah.
20
So
dudes.
25 guys in total with the command squad. The Walker, a new Russ, and the Dracosan.
Yeah,
I was surprised at the two vehicles, the two tracked vehicles. I thought you'd only get one of those. Yeah, pleasantly surprised at the size of that set.
yeah. I mean, it's a tricky one. It's got to be, it's got to be a price point and a points point to make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
And I think, although I wonder if not having the sponsors on those vehicles helps, like
Mm,
whether
mm,
they save a sprue
yeah.
um, with weapons options on there.
I think the Walker is deceptive as well, because it's always tempting to think, oh, Sentinel, it's a sort of small scale Walker. It's a big beast, that Aethon thing. It's got a lot of chunk to it. I would have
Yeah, it
thought.
has.
I mean, you look at those that set as well. Two of those sets is a pretty good
Star
core,
Force, yeah,
yeah,
core, yeah,
core force, a core mechanized solar auxiliary force. Um,
indeed.
you add in a couple of the Velatari, and that's starting to look quite tasty. And a few of
Yeah,
the tasty tanks, but there was more than just what was in that box as well. Announced.
yeah, but I'm just still looking at this box. So you got four options on the Russ, four options on the main gun on the Sentinel, which is pretty awesome, and the rockets on the side as well.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I don't know how much it's going to be, but it's going to be that similar kind of price range to the Mark III. I would have thought maybe, yeah,
the
that
battle
kind of
group, yeah,
this kind of
it's
box
equivalent.
set
Yeah.
has a set price roughly, doesn't it? Um, if they release everything all at the same time so that people aren't rushing just to get these, yeah, that's a really cool box. Yeah, because some people won't want the dudes. I think they did a really good job actually of making the dudes in plastic as well. Like it reminded me that I'm not the biggest fan of the aesthetic of the Solar Auxilia helmets and stuff,
Mm,
but they've been pretty good in transferring the sculpts across.
mm.
Really good.
I think I saw one of the sculptors of the original Solar Auxilia on Twitter, or formerly Twitter, chatting about it, um, and saying actually a bunch of these things, it wasn't possible to bring some of that detail across. Well, not
Yeah.
detail, but some of the features of the resin ones didn't come across. It had to be tweaked. But I mean, it's very small adjustments
Mm.
that had to be
Yeah.
made. And as you say, I think it's a faithful reproduction of the intent of it. And I think they look great. I think they've really captured how they look. And I think I'd love it if they did a sort of more senior command
I,
box,
yeah. I called it
or possibly
a
resin.
I called it a Dracosan, didn't I? Of course, it's a Malcador. Sorry, I suddenly realised I think I said Dracosan.
No, 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 you did. And that's correct. It's a Dracosan in Dracosan. Dracosan
Oh
is
no,
the
sorry, they
transport.
announced the Malcador, didn't they?
The Malgador
Apologies. Yeah.
announcement is a separate thing. Yeah,
Can
yeah.
you tell I'm tired and slightly ill?
Yeah, there's a lot of vehicles with these guys with the Solar Auxilia. But the las rifle section I think looks really cool. If you get the basic dude right, that's a pretty good sign. And yeah, I kind of I thought one of the really cool looking units was that higher level command group that you
Mm,
could get, with the sort of all the frogging on the officer and stuff. I hope there is a set that will do that. I think this command set is intended to be used for the sort of lower level, like
yeah.
platoon commander, and then the higher level can be done as well. But it'd be quite cool if they did some upgrades um, to do that in the future. But overall, yeah, I think that's an exciting kit. I'm looking forward to. I mean, I would have never considered. I had never considered doing this for the reasons you said. Actually, I didn't like the overall look. Having got into them far more through Legions Imperialis and understood what they're about, and read a lot more about them, like, oh, actually, I quite like a little force. It'd be quite a limited one,
Right.
but
Yeah.
I'm seeing the plastics and like, oh, now I'm quite tempted. Doing that in resin, what didn't appeal? Certainly not resin vehicles, and not the expense of doing resin infantry. As always, I'm the target market for when they switch it over to plastic. And I'm like, yeah, actually, I think a little allied force could be quite good fun.
Yes. What's interesting is once again they've doubled down on like saying that the rules for them are in Liber Imperium. However, that's where they're going to stay.
Mm.
Really delineating these lines between game systems, and we've seen it with the old world,
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
appears to be very much well from the outside looking in, with some slight rumours. It does appear to be like um, they want the lines to be distinct to
Mm.
be able to judge sales because each department has to make its money and all that. And
Mm.
I wonder if that's a major part of doing this as well. But if I was playing Gene Stealer Cult or something like that, and I had suitable
Oh,
tank
entirely.
options, I'd be borrowing these big time.
All day. I don't think these need independent rules. Yeah, you just
No,
use them as you say. These are my guardsmen.
yeah,
I
absolutely.
absolutely think that's the case, and I think you're going to see that plenty with things like the Lehman Russ in particular, and the infantry. I mean, they just lend themselves to being a grenadier. I mean, you've been able to do that for a long time. It's just a variant regiment, isn't it? I
Yeah,
entirely think that fits. Nothing stopping you doing that. It doesn't need independent rules. But that said, I think it's quite useful that they've been upfront and clear about that.
groovy. Right. Well, okay. I've got three things here. They're all very different. Let's talk ITC because that was mentioned, uh,
Yes.
and initially seems to make no difference to heresy players generally because there are few heresy events. But basically, the ITC GW are taking over
Do you want
uh,
to just
organised
describe
play.
what the ITC is?
So there's some debate on this. So it's either international tournament circuit or independent tournament circuit, and it's been called both. However, it's been run by the guys at Frontline Gaming, inextricably, not intertwined completely with LVO because that's their prime event and it's like the season finale of ITC. Basically, you earn points at events, and they crown a winner at the end of the season. They have a hobby track as well as a gaming track, and they basically collect a lot of information as well. Um, and GW have been working with them for a while, and some of that, or they've been working with them in terms of LVO. They've also been um, like they've been influenced by the way they go about things and in the way that GW now collect data and things like that as well. And those guys know Zach, the guy who runs the events, worldwide events for GW, knows the guys very well. And there's no doubt about it, the LVO is very successful and the ITC is pretty successful as well. And this now means it's coming in to Games Workshop's fold. They haven't fully explained yet what this means, and there is going to be much more information coming. But it's part of their way to support ongoing organised play. However, organised play, they say organised play, tournament organisers, and global hobby community. It doesn't mean it's just about tournaments. This is going to be quite a big, potentially very big thing for all gamers going forward. Currently, the ITC is linked very closely with Best Coast Pairings, an app for running events, which has limited use for narrative events where you want to choose matchups, but can still be used for. You can still put people into teams, so loyalist and traitor and things like that. You can manage it for some issues. But they're looking at regional rankings and things like that. But it's part of a move to connect GW and independent events more. Now, on the tournament side of things, there's potentially GW running stuff can then lead to people seeing it being more official, which could lead to potentially even more homogenization than there has been in 40k and Age of Sigmar and things like that. I say narrative events are still very much a different thing, but we'll see if they push towards heresy, what that does for us. But keep an eye on this because, as I say, this is the initial part of this movement, and I think within I don't know how long, but we're going to see an expansion of what this means for gamers, not just tournament gamers, but gamers going forwards. And it's quite an interesting move. It's like Magic run their tournaments, their circuit, as it were, things like that. I don't know if we're going to go quite that way, but there's going to be more involvement from Games Workshop in supporting and being around independent events, which is cool. And there was a concern that if GW involved won't be able to use non-GW models. GW have been involved with many events for a while, and you've been able to use third-party miniatures in those. Bit different if they're streaming games, like they're not going to stream you using a third party's models as your Space Marines and stuff like that. But there's going to be plenty of space, I think, for that to continue carrying on. Yeah, interesting times, and of course these things are opt-in as well. You can always just say we're not utilising that aspect of whatever for your own events.
Yeah, but as a statement of intent of what they're of the way they're going to how they're going to develop something. It's an interesting sphere that they're moving into, and what they're hoping to develop with that. I think it's an interesting round. Yeah, no, I haven't thought about how it might expand into the way you're talking about, which I think is an interesting take.
Well, on the very basis of it, they're going to have a platform by which you can go and check results and things like that. One of the things about ITC is and BCP is it keeps your results. So that's going to have to come on board with GW, or GW are going to have to take over. We'll say that there's been GW are muscling in. They're not. Like for years now, various people involved in these things have wanted GW to do more, and it was very much kind of at the very least collaborating and maybe even a bit more. Hey, GW, do you want to take this further than we can go? Because it takes time effort, money, because time is money as well. And people are doing this. Yes, Frontline Gaming are a company, but
Mm,
relatively small. And have something worldwide that does everything they want it to do. We've seen places pop up and go because it costs time and money to do.
hmm
And GW, probably the only ones that can do it in that sphere of things. Otherwise, it's a huge investment up front with, you know, a very uncertain chance of success financially,
hmm mm,
or even, pretty bleak chances of success financially. So
mm,
something definitely to keep an eye on, and we will for
Yeah, an interesting observation. I think I will be interested to see how that goes.
absolutely. And then in terms of GW doing things differently, Golden Demon's back,
Yes.
but in a very strange form. So
Yeah, in a way that we weren't expecting.
no,
Yeah.
Adepticon's going ahead. They've added the old world. Cool. Maybe announced it all a bit late. Whatever. Grumble, grumble. Um, Go and watch the latest Cult Paint video for their chat about that. Because at the end of the day,
Oh, yeah. I
I
haven't
think
watched that yet, and I'm really looking forward to that.
that Andy
Yeah.
Wardle can be one of the grumpiest people in gaming. Bless him. And he knows this, and he jokes about it in that as well. But even he was like, if you're going to enter Golden Demon and it's 8 months out, enter something you know is going to be okay. If you enter 5 Space Marines, right, you know that they're going to fit into a category somewhere. Like,
Yeah.
like just focus on what you're doing with that. Don't try and game it. You'll be fine. So Adepticon, cool. But the other part they've announced is the European round, or the European round, they said,
Yes.
is going to be held at Spiel Essen. So for those who don't know, Essen Games Fair is the biggest in the world, like board
Yeah,
game,
it's
card
huge.
game. It is monstrous. I've always wanted to go. Um, it's 4 days. There's a lot of trades going, things going on, things like that. Um, it's it's quite an event from what I hear. Games Workshop have had a presence there. They have they want to attract board gamers into miniature gaming, but B, they have board games and card games and those aspects now anyway.
Mm,
And now they're going to have this out there at something that I don't think traditionally would have anything like this. And I could be wrong, you know. Um,
mm.
and it's when is it? So it's also in 3rd of October. It's the second leg of Golden Demon this year. Doesn't leave them much time for a third leg, so I'm not sure there will be a third leg. It's
Very
right
unlikely
in,
to be in that period of time as well, in the time
yeah,
frame you're talking
that's
about.
what I
If you're going
mean.
to in October, it seems very unlikely you'd squeeze
Yeah.
another one in that time. I completely agree.
It's also like a week before Monty or the other one,
Oh,
model
no. Is
scale
it?
model. Yeah, which
Oh,
in some ways is brilliant because you have a proper
season.
European season. Yeah, of
Yeah.
which you have three huge painting events, all very different within a couple of months of each other, but potentially means that people are then working on three or four, five, six different projects. You still got the
Mm,
same time in the year, but it doesn't work that way, does it? Um,
mm, mm.
yeah, it's going to be really interesting. So Spiel is, I mean, Gen Con's huge. Spiel makes Gen Con look small. There's like trying to get a hotel room in in the city or is expensive.
Mm,
They have good transport links, so you can go in and out. But if you're just going for Golden Demon, like it
mm,
becomes
mm.
okay. We're English. We got to travel rather than go to Nottingham or Birmingham or what
Yeah.
Manchester. But
Got to
also,
got to travel internationally. What?
yeah,
Yeah.
even Manchester was expensive, but wasn't big game convention expensive. Like I think people are talking about $1,000 for the 3-4 nights, with ease on
Yes.
hotels,
Yes.
and that's if you can get a hotel because they're starting to sell out. Whereas Warhammer Fest in Manchester was never going to sell out the hotels, like even if something else was
No.
going on
No.
around it.
Impossible. Yeah.
So it might be expensive, but you could stay really close. So that's a challenge. And then there's a question of what it means going forwards. Does it move around Europe? Is
Mm,
it just they couldn't find a venue in the UK? One thing I was wondering was that were they going to jump in with the UK Games Expo, which again is
Mm.
another event I've never been to, but keep meaning to.
Really want to. I double booked the last
Might
time I was
have
going to go
to
to that.
this
I
year
really want to
if I
go to
get
that.
a bit.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Um,
Or
that
even
might do.
Salute, but I mean, that doesn't feel like the kind of
Salute's
event they
one
would
day,
kick off.
doesn't it? You haven't got enough time.
Oh, one day, yeah, true. It needs to
Yeah,
be a
you
multi-day,
haven't got
doesn't it?
enough
Yeah.
time, and you
No.
haven't got that much of a big venue. Like where like you've got a lot of logistical issues with Salute, being in
Yes,
London
I
where
mean,
it is and
yeah.
everything
Well,
else.
not only that, it's the area it's in
Yeah,
is it's expensive,
yeah.
very expensive to be around there. It's quite well served relatively, and obviously the transport links make it a thing. But the one day just kills that dead.
Mm.
So yeah,
But
I think
also,
them riding on the back of another event makes sense. I can see why they'd want to do that. I think they are.
well, I think
Well, yeah. Anyway, I'm speculating out into other realms there
it
about
does. I
Fest.
mean, it's apart from the few they did at Warhammer World, it's always been part of another event, but it's
Yeah,
always been part of another Games Workshop event, or most of the time, been part of
yeah.
another Games Workshop event. Does this mean we're getting zero Games Workshop events this year? Like we'd heard the rumours of no Fest. This just
I think
seems to
this
make
essentially confirms to me. This is making it a very strong hint, shall we say, that we won't be having anything even remotely like Warhammer Fest this year.
yeah. Do they
Um,
look to? I wonder if they're looking to increase their presence and relevance at things like Games Expo, trying to take over a bit more of it.
Maybe. I wonder if they think that they would want to do that sort of thing in their own venue at Warhammer World, and they recognise that they can't do a Warhammer Fest like event and Golden Demon at the same time.
But
Separate them out into
can't do.
two events,
I mean,
and they can't
they
do either of them effectively
that.
in that venue.
I mean, they struggled to do a Warhammer Open Day.
Yes, yes,
I because they. I wonder if with the Old World Open release weekend that they didn't think there would be need to ticket
agreed.
it, and by ticket it I mean free ticket it, just restrict numbers. Um, and you ended up with queues for hours to the point where I think Arbitorian went into town and just came back like a few hours later.
Yeah, I saw the. I mean, obviously there was lots of photos and things going around about that, and the queues snaking around the car park. I mean, it just looked a bit grim, didn't it? Wasn't a
Yeah,
great look.
someone said to me beforehand, "Are you going to go?" I was like, "No, like, they're not doing anything for it. It's like
No,
minimal. Like it's never going to be much. Like I'm cool, thank you."
yeah, yeah, and yet there was still volume there, but it didn't go. So they can't. So even if they were going to try and do that internally in their own venue, it's not an appropriate venue for it. So the logic is tack it onto another event. It means you lose the exclusivity of said event. After Fest last year, unfortunately, I think they are taking a look at it and are presumably reevaluating what they do with that and just not going to repeat it if they're ever going to try and do that sort of thing again. Who
Which
knows? We've got no idea.
so yeah, with all the changes that have happened at Warhammer World as well. So we went up there just after Christmas, and if I've got no fest or anything like that, I do feel that GW's lacking something.
Yeah,
It really feels like there's something missing. Like Warhammer World is still good to go to, but it's not quite the same as it used to be, and that might just be my personal if kind of effect of that, but doesn't quite have the same buzz. So maybe it's just for people like me who've been many times. Like maybe it's less of an appeal. I don't know. It's tricky.
that's interesting. That's interesting to hear you say that because there are people I know who have gone for the first time or taken family members particularly, and they still speak with it about it in a very excited way and say
That's
it
cool.
sort of impresses people, which is great. But like you say, it doesn't innovate. Perhaps is one way of looking at it. It doesn't add new things. That's not to say they should. There's no expectation there or otherwise, but it's just interesting that that's an aspect, isn't it? That as a venue or something that they might consider that they're limited there by the four walls that they're in. Whereas a show like a fest or similar, you've got more opportunity to innovate in what you're offering. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting that your view was that, particularly as you've been quite recently.
Yeah.
You couldn't put your finger on it, presumably, what the
Well,
specific
I
thing
mean,
is.
but part of it is I think I used to know so many staff that worked in that building who now work in other buildings, so they're not in Bugman's the same way they
Right.
used to be. But
Mm.
Bugman's felt a little bit. The atmosphere felt a little bit, I don't know, less.
Interesting. Mm.
Yeah, I don't quite know the words for it, but it didn't quite thrill the way it like used to. Like I'm home. I'm not like I'm home when I'm there anymore, and that might just
Interesting.
be an element of me going a lot. Um, Overall, as I say, it might say more about me than it does about Warhammer World. But definitely, you look at what we used to have with Black Library Weekenders, Heresy Weekenders. Obviously, they're not going to come back. Games days. It used to be fest events at Warhammer World that had something about them rather
Yeah,
than just selling you things. Uh, that there's been a real backward step to where we are now,
yeah,
and I
yeah.
hope they reverse that trend.
I saw you comment, you were discussing it with someone about that, and someone was just commenting generally, saying, "Well, it's lost a lot because the creatives aren't there to be able to communicate." And you said, "Yep, that's a thing. Doesn't mean you can't have a thing because but that thing would have to be different. It would need to
Yeah,
find its
old
own
Games
niche."
Day, they did
Yeah,
have some creatives there, but it was random. It was not advertised that well. They weren't
no,
there all the time. Uh, you didn't spend a huge amount of time with them back in the day.
not
I
at all.
remember the High Elves book coming out, and basically I was like, oh, they've all got Always Strike First. It's like the first scene in Lord of the Rings, and the writer's on, yeah, it's exactly what it's like. And that was it, 5 minutes. But there was enough going on in that hall that I didn't feel like I had to be talking to them for hours to make, half a day seem worthwhile.
Mm,
Um, I did get to meet John Blanche. Didn't really say much to him because I don't, I know what I like with pretty pictures. But talking about it is always a bit tricky. Yeah, we're never going to get the access we had, particularly with the Weekenders. We used to speak to Rachel Harrison. Like, I love her artwork.
hmm
Completely mystifies me. Even Reese doing his the digital book art, like, wonderful stuff. We're not going to get that. Fine, but
no,
you need to replace it with something. By all accounts, the people who went and played events at Warhammer Fest had a good time because that's what they were there for, and it was done
yeah,
okay. So yeah, hey, yeah, I don't know, and their events as well. Like, I was talking to a mate who's moving back from America to the UK. And he's like, I want to go and play Old World at Warhammer World, so I need to buy official GW minis, and I'm like, well, you know, if you get a ticket to a Warhammer World event, because
yeah, yeah.
they've reduced numbers and it's much more popular. So like it's just much harder to get enthused. Really enthused like I used to. As I say, used to get to Warhammer World and feel I was at home, and now I'm like, cool, I'm at Warhammer World.
Well, the sense of excitement about going to a Games Workshop event. I mean, they were fixtures in my calendar
Yeah,
going up to Warhammer Fest. I mean, you and I have been to several together. I've been going to them for years. Being there, I was there, as they say, at the launch of the Heresy
yep,
Games Day thing, and that was extraordinary. Um,
yes,
the energy going around that, seeing everyone run across this floor to go and keep sort of be part of this, and then what happened afterwards, Weekenders was a whole other thing. Like you
yeah,
said, those aren't going to exist. Just
no,
you kind of one has to face that. But it seems a real shame. You can still look at it as a shame that I'm not excited about going to Games Workshop events because they don't exist.
yeah,
These were not. I'm not going to get excited about going to a tournament in the same way. I'm going to Beachhead. I'm going to enjoy that. I'm looking forward to seeing people and hanging out with those people far more than I am about the actual act of playing the game. I'll enjoy
yeah.
that as well, but not that's not the
Go to
primary driver for me.
go to a Games Workshop tournament or event, gaming event. Where's your USP?
Yeah,
Like your
entirely.
Games Workshop, like your USP should be access to creatives or IP or say like there are various ways to do it. If you're just
Yeah,
running an event, cool. Your USP is your Games Workshop running an event. Um,
yeah,
where actually, due to the nature of the way the constraints on the way you sell your game and the way you want it to be out there, you can argue that various independents do it better. And I'm
yeah.
still hanging out with my mates, and cool. I might not get some GW swag, but
Mm,
is that enough to make it worthwhile? Not that they run a bad events, that's not what I'm saying. But
no,
yeah, there are constraints
it's
within what
it's
they do.
just it's tricky to think what those events could now be, as on the assumption, on the basis that the creatives are not going to be part of it anymore because that's a decision the company has taken
Yeah.
to
And you
take it
know
that way,
what? Great.
right or wrong.
Send Games Workshop out. to Europe. Move it around to different places.
Mm,
Brilliant, cool, crack on. This is not. I don't even enter. I'm tempted to go
mm.
to Spiel to have a look, and because it's Spiel as well. Um, but
That's an
yeah,
interesting way of looking at it. It does make going to Spiel more appealing. Yeah, that's an interesting
um,
idea.
yes, but I've always wanted to go. Um,
Yeah,
whether this allows me the justification to go in my own head, I'm not sure because of the
yeah,
expense.
yeah,
Uh, so hey, whatever. But um, yeah, maybe next year we have three Golden Demons, like something like
mm,
that.
mm,
Because you got not having a flagship event seems really strange.
mm,
Really strange. My hope is that they've gone right. We need to review what we do. This is going to take us a while. All
mm.
right. We're not even going to bother next year, like 2024. We're not going to bother. Let's have GD out there. Cool. Let's try and hit 2025 with a new plan.
I think that's possible. But I think they've probably gone.
It's
I mean, these
possible.
sorts of events must take at least a year to plan and set up and do it at least. So
Well,
you'd
that
have to
might
come
be.
straight off the back of the last fest and have to be straight into the next one.
Yeah.
If you're saying this last one was not a success by whatever metric you use, um, take your pick. If by whatever metric they're choosing internally, they say this was not a success, and based on the reviews, including our own, that we came back with at the task time and seeing what pretty much universally people were saying, even those who enjoyed aspects of it, there were things they said, this is an area for improvement, to put it mildly. Um, you recognize that. Like you say, you take the time to do it. You say, well, we're not going to have time to both reinvent what we're going to do and organize it in time. We need to skip at least a year. We'll come back when we've rethought what this thing is and what we're going to do. I hope that's what they do. Because as you say at the moment, the lack of that is a real shame.
Yeah, and maybe going so much for the way they work doesn't help them with all that either.
Mm.
Anyway, moving on. One final bit of interesting stuff. Typical Imperial Truth news chat here. The Games Workshop PLC half-yearly report for the 9th of
Mm.
January 2024. So this is looking back on the same period to 2023. Everything was up basically everything was up except for licensing,
Mm.
which basically just means they were at the end of some licenses. But that's good for GW that everything else was up. Like
Mm.
they do, in light of the old world releasing some donkeys years old metal models, some with not the greatest sculpts. Their strategy is to continue their strategic goal to make the best fantasy miniatures in the world. Okay, leave that one there. Um, uh, they're extremely healthy. Like they've got 3 months of money sat in the thing, which is like £75 million. Like it's crazy to think of them like that. Now, I think they identified like protection of the IP as one of their biggest threats
Mm.
when you're looking at dealing with Amazon and more licensing. It makes absolute sense. Uh, we own what we believe is some of the best underexploited intellectual property globally. Uh, so this is obviously an area where they feel that they can really push on, um, which is cool. And to ensure no harm is done to the core business, a key risk we highlight every year.
Mm. Mm.
So it's nice to see that. And with all the excitement with Amazon as well, they they mentioned the warehousing issue, which is essentially they putting it down to legacy software systems and integration with new systems being a major issue. And they talk about their three manufacturing plants and they're not actually at capacity, like they don't need to expand, but they are trying to identify a fourth site. So, again, part of the key risks are being aware and being ahead of, planning those things,
Mm. Mm.
which is quite an interesting thing to be looking at. But yeah, uh, loads of figures if you want to go and look at that.
Yes, and there's various people who sort of analyse that, and as they tend to do, see these around online. And I think that people who are doing that, and I tell you what puts that into real perspective, though, and you've recommended it before. You said about the checking out the Jordan Sorcery YouTube channel, which I have done and very much have done with vigor, having seen
Yeah,
what is covered in there. There's some fascinating discussions that Jordan has done with some of the people who were involved. No, it's not just the creators, because for his background, and he's mentioned before, I've seen him interviews, and he finds the way that the business had to develop and the business decisions and how that becomes a back and forth between the sort of the creative developments of the business as well, saying, well,
mm,
there's a business case for this, so we have to produce this, and then or but equally there's a creative process going on, going, we've made this, is it successful, or can we make this? No, we can't, because it's not going to work from a business perspective. So he finds the kind of business development and how that then echoes the developments of the games very interesting. He's said that's one of his personal interests. It comes through in his shows. And I watched the show that he did. Of, and I think his interview style is really good. With the previous CEO,
yeah,
Mark
Mark
Wells.
Wells. Yeah,
That is a fascinating watch. If a business is generally of interest to you, that is a
I'd
fascinating watch,
say
which puts into context what you just said, everything in the report.
I would actually say it's a discussion rather than an interview, Jordan.
That's a better description. Absolutely, yeah.
And he, and he addressed this. It might be on his Patreon, might be somewhere else. That we are not the BBC. We can't go to these people and ask hard questions because at the
No,
end of the day, they just say, "Who are you? Go away." So
yeah, you're like, I don't want to
you
be a part of
can't
that.
you can't ask Alan Merritt about the Chapter House court issues and what may or may not have gone on because why is he going to talk to you about it? So when we get authors on and people might say, "Oh, Greg, you didn't ask this," and it's like, well, I want them to come back.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. And I also,
uh,
I'm not interested in making them
well,
uncomfortable. I mean,
yeah,
that's
I'm
not.
not. I don't. I've had conversations like that with some authors. I've had talks like that, but I, I like most of them. I like them as people, so I don't want to do that. B, I want them to come back. If I'm going to make them feel uncomfortable, why are they going to come back on my show? And we're upfront about that. We're not interviewing them in that respect.
No, and that's
But
a
yeah,
completely different prospect as well. It's all right to have that
yeah,
conversation with someone in a one-on-one scenario. If you're recording it to then put it out for public consumption, of course they're not going to have that conversation with you. Why would they choose to do so? The idea of a forum being that is not a failing of the or rather a channel choosing to do it, a channel show, whatever, choosing not to do that. I think it makes perfect sense. I found those all of the things that Jordan's put together. I thought your recommendation was bang on. I hadn't realised quite how much. I really enjoyed that, and given that you mentioned the quarterly report there, I found those more more interesting having watched that particular one. And
yeah.
he's got a couple there that talk about how the business evolved. The one with Alan Merritt, the one with Mark Wells, particularly, but others as well. How they developed the games and how that. I haven't watched the Rick Priestley one yet. Actually, I must do
No,
that.
neither have I, to be honest.
But they are, yeah. If I would recommend that, if people are in all curious, on the back of what you said there about the financial report,
There are some,
exciting times.
yeah, there was some really interesting stuff in terms of like they've got 169,000 subscribers to Warhammer Plus,
Mm.
which is up from 115 from 22-23. Cool. Like their emails do it. There is some really interesting nuggets here that don't necessarily give you a huge pic, but talking about being happy with their launch of the website was an interesting one. Um,
I was about to mention that. I
but
thought this is the
also,
one where they talk about the website, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, but also these reports are, again, they're not going to come out and say we cut this up, are they? Like, they're going to be circumspect in the way they do things, but fairly honest. Just an interesting view on that one.
Mm.
But their strategy is to talking about their IP again. They got the television series. video games. Yeah, they what was one thing was interesting. They highlighted IT strategy and delivery and media as their two key risk areas. Uh, dependent on IT support, they're talking about they've still got work to do with various IT integrations and things like that because they've
Mm.
got a new warehouse going to Australia and America, which will help ease their shipping issues. They'll be able to ship stuff over earlier if they can store it for that little bit longer, that kind of thing. Um, and the IP team in this one making sure that every use of their IP is consistent and correct with how they want it to be, and with someone like ADB, relatively near the top of the management role within that. I can't think of many better people to protect GW's IP than ADB. I don't know exactly how it works in that structure, but you know, he's up in there. He's a can't remember what his job title is now, but it's up there. You can find it on IMDb. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, the usual stuff for a
Mm.
lot of it is. But yeah, like positive, which is good because they might have things we're unhappy with, and they might have things we ask them to change, but we want a healthy GW because
Mm.
that means the game's healthy. Because, as you say, listening through those Jordan Sorcery, there are times when the company struggled.
Oh goodness me! Yeah, I didn't realise to what extent. And obviously, there's been quite a few people coming out and talking to different shows. We've mentioned the painting phase before. They had a
Yeah.
few the products developer talking quite candidly about a bunch of things and challenges, but they're very. I mean, everyone's going to have their particular perspective, and so the more of those, you tend to pick up a more interesting picture. I hadn't realised the. I mean, every business goes through some challenges. I think they've got some very interesting challenges coming up that they're going to have to overcome. I'm sure. Well, yeah, we'll touch on all sorts of things about that. For example, as you said, the warehousing,
Mm.
getting products out. We've had some very challenging launch days recently. The End of the Death 3 being chief among them, and
Oh yeah, we haven't
realizing that
talked
they're
about
on the
that one
radar.
yet.
Well, I do. I feel like do we talk about that as part of the book? I'm not
I
sure.
think
Um,
no, because I think it's
it's
a
an
separate
interesting one.
issue. What's interesting
Well,
is
that I think it's particular. I mean, as you mentioned the website there earlier, isn't it, about
mm,
realizing that they are now. It seemed to be much more of a marker that Games Workshop now are recognised outside of much more readily outside of people who are in the community and the fandom and who are fans
yeah.
anyway. It's been recognised by another group of people, and this is something that other markets have had to deal with. That of electronics like PlayStations, graphics
Well,
cards, and
everything,
similar
trainers,
sneakers,
yeah,
anything that's high demand, low
overload.
supply.
And it's
It's
nothing
something
new, is it?
they've had. It's not new, but it's
They're
something they
just more
haven't had to deal with in the
sophisticated,
same
yeah.
way. Yeah, exactly. And it's a community has turned their attention to it. Yeah.
And what's interesting is it looks like more of those books have been um, cancelled as well, orders and things like that. Um, could you imagine? I do want to actually. I could come back to that. Just want to say one thing that has been mentioned around a lot of those interviews, not just Jordan, but other people as well, is with Brian Ansell's death. Um, uh,
Yes. Yeah.
how like kind of everyone knew the name back in the day, and new people might not. But when we talk about the way GW are run, and lots of people are saying things now like, oh, they're only in it for the money, they're only doing this, it's all business decisions. So Brian Ansell owned Citadel Miniatures, if I remember correctly. He
Yes.
then led the buyout of Games Workshop and brought it all under one roof. There's a famous story that when he wanted to move, he told the White Dwarf production moved from London to Nottingham, that the following White Dwarf had spelled, what uh, was it F off Brian Ansell or something like that?
Sod off,
Was
I
the
thought, or
sod
something like
off?
that.
Yep,
Yeah.
sod off
Was in the
Brian
contents
Ansell
page. Yeah.
was the front letter of each word spelled sod off Brian Ansell, and was not subtle either.
Yeah.
Um, and apparently he kind of sort of respected and laughed at that. But he, you don't have to listen to very much, for, even from the people who liked him and respect him. He was a hard man to work for, and
Yes. I got that
they
impression. People could
the
be
creatives
hinting at all sorts. Yeah.
yeah, the creatives butted heads with him because at various times he was like, "Here's the monetary reasons why we're doing it this way, so you're doing it this way." Gorka
Mm.
Morka was made because they had so many kits and were told to make a game based on those kits. That money-led games design. Uh,
Mm.
all the restrictions were based on finances. So what Games Workshop have done, it might be to a grander scale. It's no different than Games Workshop have been, as a Warhammer company, as it were, in that era, right at the start. Brian
Yeah,
Ansell was
and
doing it.
because that's how companies
That's how
work.
companies are
Yeah.
successful, yeah, and there are different ways of doing it, and some will be more successful, and sometimes it's, sometimes things will overstep the mark, and that's the nature of life. But Games Workshop would not be here. The hobby, you could argue the wargaming hobby would not look the same without Brian Ansell
Mm.
and those methods. And for all those accounts of he was a hard man to work for, everyone, almost every single person I've heard speak about him speaks well of him.
Oh yes,
I've never met
I
the
feel the
guy.
same, and
So
including the things he brought to it as a business. If I'm not
yeah,
mistaken, I think the culture of customer service,
yeah.
which is generally, I would say almost unfailingly, has been praised as one of the best. You ring him up over anything, it's extraordinary customer
As
service.
a part timer, yeah, like McDonald's were looked at as like someone on the McDonald's management training program, is a good potential starter for your company to work up through ranks. And at one point, it was, oh, you were trained in customer service by Games Workshop. That was a positive in the
Yeah,
work environment.
it was recognised across a range of different
Yeah. And that's gone up
fields
and
and
down
things.
over
Yeah,
the years and what
yeah,
have you. But
but it
yeah,
brought about a number of things. And as you say, even people who work with him who were like, yeah, this might have been challenging. I mean, people say that, don't they? About a lot of
yeah,
people, it sounded like there was some extraordinary things he was able to bring
yeah.
about,
I'm
which is
not putting
no
him in the
small thing.
same context, but you hear the stories about Steve Jobs and
Mm.
other people like that, and make your own judgments and whatever. But there's a lot of negatives about him, but also, well, the company did well, whether it was him or
Yes,
other people. That's part
yeah,
of management. Sometimes it's not what you can do; it's what you can get out of other people.
mm.
Um, so yeah, that's all fun. Yeah, so thank you for everything he did. Uh,
Yes, well said. Yes.
yeah, and the end of the Death 3, like the one thing that's interesting for me with that, and we will move on from this fairly soon, been talking a while, is how many people who've talked about being burnt out buying limited editions.
Mm.
And I
Hmm.
wonder how they're replaced. Because I just think more people will take their place.
I'm not so. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to know what the numbers are. Obviously, yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm not sure that you will see Games Workshop release a series like that where where you're gonna have such a long running series. I mean, that
Well,
was
they won't.
arguably
Yeah,
one of the
they're
bigger
never
deals.
going to do.
No, you're not going to certainly not as long as Heresy in its entirety. Arguably, maybe not as long as even the Siege. Dawn of Fire is probably of
No,
a
I think
similar scale.
no, I think 10 book series will come easy.
You think 10 book series will
Yeah.
come?
Do you think? Do you think they could
I
do
think
the
it's a
scouring
brave.
in fewer than 10 books?
But will they release each of those books as a limited edition to the
Why the hell
scale of
wouldn't
the
you?
Siege?
Why wouldn't you do 2,500 run copies when you know they're going to sell?
Because I'm not convinced that's as compelling a case as it once was. Because I think, as you say, there's been a vast number of people. And what is that as a percentage of the total market? I've got no idea. But there's been a vast number of people who would have bought them without question. Previously, myself and pretty much my
Yeah.
entire gaming group were that people.
You're
Now,
dead, Howard. Move on. Let
universally,
someone
well, this is
fresh
it.
and new take your place. That's what will happen.
I don't know if they
How,
will. I don't know if
you're
they will. I don't know if
you're on the
people will.
Facebook groups, on the book Facebook groups. You see the people
Yeah.
who are coming in and are starting to collect. Right, collecting is a facet of uh, personality that goes hand in hand with
Are there as many of
hobbying
those
and
though?
gaming.
Is there as many of those as those who
I
were
don't.
buying them in the first place?
Um, I think the heresy's got a higher cachet than anything else because of
Hmm.
the nature of what it is, for sure. Do I think they can sell 2,500 limited copies of we're doing a 15-book run on the Scouring. Yeah.
Mm.
Will will it be awkward? I mean,
I mean, I'm just
so
thinking that I can't be alone, and I think from what I've
no,
seen, you see a lot of people. I'm not. I'm not going to buy another. I'm not going to buy into another limited edition run. I chose not to do that already with the Primarch series. It's completely not going to happen now for others, and I've heard that story repeated a lot,
I've
where
heard.
people say, "Well, I'm not going through that stress again."
Okay, Primarchs is
And
a
the
good
risk of
shout
it.
then. People who started the Heresy limited editions, I know a few who said they weren't doing it with the Primarchs. The Primarchs still sold out really quickly and still
Mm.
like, go and buy the Lion Primarch book or the Russ's Primarch book or
But I
Gilda's
would say the
Primarch book.
proportion of people who are saying they're not going to go for a limited edition series again has increased dramatically
Yeah, yeah.
since
You
the
only
end
need
and
to
the
sell
death. Parts
2,500.
1, 2, and 3. Yes, true.
It's a tiny percentage of people who read the books.
Mm.
And if you do have it quietened down, then the grumble about it will quieten down and the tide will come back in
Mm.
as well. So you'll get less grumbling, so more people might be attracted to it. Yeah, I just think they will. Whether those books will then have the secondary market, that's a different aspect. What's
Mm.
interesting, I was listening to another podcast, and when you're talking about collecting these books, and people go, yeah, I think it was Garrow, was Facebook Garrow, real life person Garrow, was talking about you should be able to prove you've got all the other books before you can buy, which I think is an absolute terrible idea, because again, you just lock out anyone new who wants to collect.
I also
But
enjoyed the fuel. Sorry, I'll let you continue. Yeah, carry on.
another podcaster who loves the Imperial Fists, so the only limited edition book he got was um, uh, Saturnine, whichever one.
Mm.
Yeah, one of
Mm.
them might have been Saturnine. He got that one limited edition out of those 8 books. So out
Mm.
of those 2,500, one person can't get a complete collection because he wants only that one book.
Mm.
Like that's gonna
Mm.
happen. Like you cannot
Yeah.
stop that. It's not always the scalpers, though there is a major issue, which GW are trying to fix. To some, I
Well,
mean,
I thought it
whether
was
you,
interesting. It was interesting that they did even acknowledge it and did a thing to
yeah,
try and deal with it. And it's where particularly this conversation becomes interesting coming out of the report aspect of it, and then saying they've invested in the website and similar. A very good friend of mine was in the Pool store to try and purchase
yeah,
the Volume 3. The website went the way it did on the in-store terminal. The store manager happened to know a web developer or web team member, gave them a call and said, "What's going on?" He said, "Well, the website is failing under the load or whatever." It sounded like it was being attacked in a way that
yeah,
they weren't used to. Do you think that's becoming a more sort of infrastructure based conversation, not just,
yeah.
oh, there's high demand. It's like, no, that you're having to defend yourself against an attack at equivalent type of thing. It's a very different type of conversation. And then it becomes an interesting thing because it's not just the books. That's happening now with, I mean, it happened with the Lion, didn't it? It's happening
Mm.
with limited edition box sets, even with models that are going to be available in weeks, barely even months. um, Separately or otherwise, people are, no, I want the box. I'm a fan of this. And then I will go to the secondary market. Becomes a very interesting. What do they do as a response to that? And that's where I found their response to the end of the Death 3 in particular was interesting. That they did decide to tackle that head on and say, yeah, we are seeing people buy this specifically with a view to selling it on, or however they phrased it on the community article. And we're going to tackle that. We're going to cancel multiple orders or whatever. I don't think they went into the specifics of what they were going to do. And yet still the second run was problematic.
Well, the problem is you've got many fewer books, and
Yes.
the
Mm.
same people who purchased before thinking, well, I'll make just as much money off this one. So you've actually created an even tighter kind of throttle on that. And
Yeah.
obviously the website wasn't up for doing it. How
No.
you go and resolve that, I don't know. Whether
No.
you offer special edition books without signatures alongside signature books, some people won't collect it without the signature because that's
Well, they
what they
say
want.
I want the super special limited edition one,
Exactly. Yeah.
not the regular limited edition one. Yeah, quite.
Yeah. So
I saw people drawing. I mean, there's various people making suggestions. Yeah, like you, it made me laugh when people said, "Well, they'll need to be. You should be able to answer questions about about the heresy." You're like, I don't think that's a condition of sale. That's a strange route of
yeah.
going down it. But I mean, other industries that have had issue with touts or scalpers or whatever you call them, resellers, secondary markets, have gone through different solutions. England Rugby is an interesting reference.
Mm,
They created a fan
membership.
club.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do a fan club system and a membership system. Yeah.
But,
Games Workshop has one of those.
does that just become part of the cost of being a scalper and then fed into the resale value
Possibly,
potentially?
but it
Yeah.
becomes much more of a headache and impediment to it. Yeah, there's always going to be ways around it, but apparently England Rugby that overcame somewhere between 80 and 90% of their problem. That doesn't mean it's eliminated, but
Yeah.
it eliminates a significant portion. And bearing in mind, it wasn't just a subscription system. You had to prove you were a person with photo ID. You had to register a single address. There was quite a few hoops you had to jump through. And previously, probably until a few weeks ago, people were dead against it. I'm not having a subscription system I don't want to pay to just have access to buy something else. That story has changed somewhat. There's more people going, well, actually, yeah, let's put it behind Warhammer Plus because the alternatives are all looking a bit grim. Making it store only, for example, another option,
Which
penalises
is a
people who are
terrible
further away.
option. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Um,
penalises a
I
vast number
mean,
of people who can't get to
there
store.
is fundamentally, there's no easy one
No,
answer.
you pick the least worst
Um,
option, don't you? Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Which is definitely not getting authors to sign 7,000 copies of books. I
Yeah.
just don't care what you say. Like, it adds time. It adds. I know there are some authors that can do it, but like, say you've got, I don't know, Graham McNeil, right? Well, bad example, but works full time, um, but writes in effectively his time off. So his writing time is then, time he hasn't got with the family, which, more than one job, fair enough, lots of people do it. Um, but when you get things like if he does a few thousand signatures, it's does he want to sit there again and do that? Maybe he does. Maybe the remuneration is absolutely fine for him to make that decision, but that's time he's not writing. So then, do you slow down the other books he's writing?
Mm, mm,
And then also like, yeah, cool. There's 10,000 copies of this book. Well, how limited is it then in a niche hobby to have?
mm.
Like, I always felt that I was in the minority because I had a Pratchett book that wasn't signed. Like, you
Mm.
know what I mean? Like when it got to
And
that point of
made to order is tempting for and I agree. Just take away the signed
they did
aspect
it.
of it.
Yeah, I think there's an argument in more special editions rather than limited editions. I think there is
Yeah,
potentially an argument in that middle ground of you can have the fancy book, but you don't get his signature and the other little bit that go with it.
yeah.
That might be enough for the casual collectors, as it were, who just want it to
Mm.
look good on the shelf. Um, but I don't know. But we're not going to have a heresy. I don't think the scalper thing's going to go away because
No.
of the nature of the
Well,
beast.
the fact that it's spread over into, I mean, it won't be quite as acute. And like you say, I mean, actually, the steps that were taken, I think, were taken in good faith with a
Yeah,
genuine
made
attempt
it
to do
worse.
something. And unfortunately, yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, you only had to
yeah,
go on eBay. At one point, you thought, "Oh, great, they're doing really well." There's no copies on eBay now. Yeah, yeah, and then promptly a whole bunch appear as soon as the book is actually physically released, because then it's
yeah.
not in breach of eBay's terms
Well,
and
it's not
conditions,
in breach of
and the
eBay's
price has
terms
gone
and
up.
conditions anyway, um, because
Well,
you are allowed to pre-sale. But
well, yeah, that's we won't get into
you
that.
don't, if
There's other ways of interpreting that. Price
if
gouging
you
is
fill
also
it
not
out
allowed.
properly, price gouging
Yeah,
is a different issue.
yeah,
Absolutely. But there's
that is in breach. But anyway, there's
yeah,
ways
that
of
is in
a
breach.
lot of them did get taken down
Yeah,
unusually through eBay's
yeah,
system,
it was
but they all
really
went back up.
interesting.
They went back up again on with higher prices.
Yeah, of course. And well, that's the other thing, isn't it? When you reduce the pushes the prices up because you're reducing availability, which
Mm.
is it's not a reason not to do it. I'm not saying that. Um, what really made me kind of giggle was back in the day you would have to wait 3 months before you got the next edition of the book.
Yeah,
Like, could you
yeah,
imagine if that was the issue? Like,
yeah.
I would be wanting a limited edition so I could read it and then sell it on,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
even if it was at 50 quid. But I
Mm.
would be there thinking, no, I need this book because I need to read it now.
Yeah. I can't risk being behind the curve.
No.
I can't risk
Whereas,
there being spoilers. Yeah.
yeah, a few people were like, "Have you got your book, Greg?" I'm like, "Yeah, downloaded at midnight."
Yeah. Same.
Like,
Yeah.
I started reading it that night and fell asleep very quickly because I was
Well,
shattered.
and same,
Uh,
even with them being released, I wanted the special edition to go on the shelf,
yeah,
but I would have bought the ebook to read because I'm virtually all of my reading is done on my commute.
yeah.
I mean, that's not. I was going to get the two anyway, so um, taking that limited edition on the
But
tube, yeah, not going to happen.
no, exactly. We got the Black Library celebration coming up in a couple of weeks.
Hmm.
I've got a feeling they're going to announce the next project there. I just makes no sense to me why you didn't release End of the
I
Death Part
completely
3
agree.
there
The
without
only, yeah, I
a
agree. There's a
replacement
logical.
announcement.
I
So
thought
I'm
your
not saying
suggestion there was
release
a good one.
there.
Hmm.
I'm saying announce that. And I think when you look at the gap in their profit, or their income that the heresy leaves, um, I can't imagine they don't do another decent sized series. Not 54 books plus 8 books, but
Hmm.
12 to 15 minimum.
Hmm.
Um, I think there's only one standout. I know people want Unification Wars. I don't particularly want that. I would like that to remain in the shadows as much as possible. The odd story here and there, fine. You've got Age of Apostasy. You've got countless other little bits and
There's a
pieces.
bunch of them, isn't there? The big named
But
things. There's the false Primarch, or the two
yeah,
Primarchs.
we'll talk about a little bit about the way they ended End of the Death 3, but there's just such an obvious story thread to continue that
Yes.
if someone said to me tomorrow, "Oh, yeah, this is coming out," I'd be like, "Yeah, cool,
Hmm.
expected." Um,
I think the
but
size of it will be interesting. Whether it is that scale, I,
see, I
I'm not
haven't
sure.
read the Dawn of Fire. I haven't kept up with that one.
Me
But
neither.
the
Hmm.
Beast Arises was an attempt to recreate the heresy on a smaller scale, have a defined like 10 book arc or whatever it was, 12 book arc. Um, and for various reasons, it didn't work. And I don't think they quite got their meetings right. And I think there were issues around what was, it was at a time when BL were being BL, particularly. But I think if they could get down and actually, I think the Siege actually struggled from not being as clearly defined. Well, no, maybe it was clearly defined, but the plan, the layout of the books not being quite as smooth as it could be. Like some books didn't seem to do a lot, and then other books seemed to be able to having to squeeze stuff in,
Hmm.
uh, rightly or wrongly. Whether that is kind of how it had to happen or not, I don't really know. But if they could come up with a plan that was, had minimal changes to it, we're seeing we saw Big Garmin be thrown in as a whole book, like
Hmm.
within months of like, oh shoot, yes, we probably should have done that, like that kind of mistake. I mean,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
then I think a series would really benefit from being that well planned out.
Yeah, I agree. I think that could be quite good. I think
Whether they can do
the
it,
Beast Arises is an interesting example because that felt. I can't remember if it was 10 or 12 books long, but it felt like it was two
two
to
or
four
three. Yeah.
books too long.
Well, I think
And
so. I think they
yeah,
planned part of it, and then there were Black Library issues. I'm trying to remember the time period of whether it was the taking authors' names off. It feels like it might have
mm,
been after that. But there was definitely a period where authors and Black Library weren't
no,
100% on the same page. And I think they had a bit of a gap in their meetings and things like that. And
mm.
then they kind of came back to it. So it was like, oh, yeah, we're going to do this. And then it ran out of steam. And then they were like, oh, yeah, like, cool, let's get back into it and sort it out. And I think it suffered a little bit for that.
I just wonder if the scouring is a similar thing. I mean, it's essentially a sort of singular event in the same
But
way the
you would
Beast
hope.
Arises is.
Yeah, well, no, Scaring's not a singular event. Scaring's multiple events. You've got things like the Iron Cage, you've got things like Caliban, you've got things like it's a much broader scope, even weirdly than Heresy,
Yeah,
because it hasn't
I
got a
suppose.
focus. That's you haven't got that one focus.
No, no. I suppose. And you're not racing to some end game. It just sort of at that period presumably transitions to something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. The idea of it being a 15, 20 book thing, I feel like limit it to like 8 or 6 or
I suppose
something. It won't, as you say. I don't think it will, but I think
well,
the
it depends
temptation will
what
be great.
stories you have to tell, and I haven't researched the scouring enough to know, but
No,
you have to give the Iron Cage. I'm sure that's scouring. You have to give that its full thing because that's such an important aspect of it. Um,
I don't know if the second founding is part of the scouring.
I don't exactly,
That
well,
comes a bit later.
the talks between Dawn and
Yeah, exactly.
Guilliman about the codex. So yeah, I think the
Mm.
scouring does come thingy does come into that at least part. Um, you've got Guilliman and that might be further on. Guilliman and Fulgrim.
I think that's quite a bit
Um,
further on. I think that's quite a bit
yeah, you
later.
might be right. It's too late for me to think, but yeah,
But
if they
yeah,
can plan out like the however many stories they need to tell and do it the right way, and
mm.
and allow for because there's always a little bit of a buffer in there and a variance. Um, but I would look forward to that because you're looking at obvious threads that are left from the heresy because they can't tie everything up. Um, absolutely, and you've got a very different universe as well to play
Mm.
into. But we will see. We will
Black
see.
Library Celebration not that far away, as you say. We'll see what
Yes,
comes in that and things afterwards.
indeed. And yeah, okay, cool. Well, we'll take a break there and we'll come back and we will talk. We'll answer some questions. Okie dokie. So we are going to dive into. We have a smattering of questions from you, good listener. We should we start with Dan because he was the guy who started sending questions in, and we thought, screw it, let's do a segment.
Indeed, he did. He was quite keen to ask. A fan of the show, Dan. He
Indeed,
did have a few questions there, and he sent them
friend
over,
of
and
the
we have
show,
made him wait.
friend.
Long-time friend of the show and personal as well. He has asked 3 questions, and we've
Greedy.
made him wait a while for them. Well, yeah. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
And the first of those questions is: given the large amount of terrain I seem to have acquired, what, if any, role does terrain scenery have in a game? Not the game, a game. So perhaps it's more general, but presumably specifically talking about 28 mil Horus Heresy. I think it's pretty essential.
Yeah. Uh, Terrain can change a game. So whether
Yes.
we're talking about heresy, AT, or Legions Imperialis, potentially even bigger than the other two. But the more terrain you have, like units change, how good certain units are. If you listen to some of the other Adeptus Titanicus podcasts, particularly the ones where they talk about heavy or heresy podcasts that cover Titanicus, there's one of the American guys, I think it might be the Remembrance's Retreat, were always banging on about how like almost overpowered warhounds were when other people weren't as much, and that's because they used a large amount of terrain in their games, which allowed
Mm.
those warhounds to get into position without being shot at first. So, yeah, a warlord is no good if it can never shoot anything, um,
It's
and,
funny
and
you
it's
should
too
mention that,
slow to do that.
as I got caught out in the first AT tournament I attended, where I thought, oh, I moved my warlords in, got this great positioning, this is going to work out really well, protected the flanks, those warhounds aren't going anywhere. They suddenly jumped over a very large piece of terrain. And I was like, sorry, what? And
Oh
the
yeah,
person said, yeah, I know. He said, it does look a bit weird, but this is how this works. And it represents the sort of nimble ability of warhounds. And I was like, okay. And he was absolutely right. I just had misinterpreted the rule. They can jump over anything half their scale. The scale being 6, that's 3 inches high. And it was like, oh. I was looking at that, and because of the nature of the models, it was and they. So not only are they quick and
I think that's a
manoeuvrable, they
terrible
could.
rule.
I completely
I
agree,
think it's
and why you
far too
often
high.
it's why you
Far
often
too
see it. You often see it adjusted
high.
to a third their scale or something in either
Yeah.
house ruling or
Yeah,
in
they're
events.
nimble. They're not. They're not.
They're not jump jets. Yeah,
Yeah. This isn't Japanese.
yeah.
mecha things. Yeah.
No, exactly. These things leaping into the air,
Mm.
declaring the weapon they're using. But yeah, they jumped over this thing and landed behind it. So I agree. I think that rule is janky
Yeah.
as all hell. But this person played it, so be it. It's a
Yeah.
tournament.
Rules is rules.
Needed to
Yeah.
be.
Fair enough.
Needed to. Yeah, rules as written, and I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's not ambiguous at all.
No.
But
And
yeah, terrain in Titanicus is enormous. In regular Heresy, I would say it depends what it is. Yeah, but it depends what game modes you can play. It determines what game modes you can play
yeah.
in Age of Darkness.
Yeah. So in Legions Imperialis at the moment, because of the limited supply of unit types and weapon options for those, the common kind of thing is, well, buildings are too powerful. And it's like, well, they are if you haven't got the weapon types that can destroy them at range or put pressure on the people inside without having to, that can bypass those rules or handle
Mm,
those rules. Then, yeah, they will dominate. As soon as you've got a balance within that, then that redresses things and they become less useful, not useful. Um,
mm,
and there's nothing wrong with under terraining a game every now and then a little bit compared to over terraining it, because what it does is it makes the balance has got to be there, and that balance is going to be different for every person, for every kind of game you're playing and everything else. The AT events at Warhammer World have traditionally been, well, you bring an exterminus, baby, because there's not a lot that can stop you shooting whatever you want to shoot at. Um,
mm,
that is probably worse than too much terrain because it becomes a real negative game experience. Um, in that, at least if there's terrain, you've still got to be able to utilize getting around it. Don't get me wrong. If you never get to shoot anything, that's also a negative game experience. But it takes it takes more skill to make the most of dense terrain than it does to make the most of lack of terrain. Um,
spot on. That's a very good qualification of that
yeah,
statement, because I was thinking I've had games of AT where there's been too much terrain, and you suddenly realise you can't fit a warlord down
yeah,
something, and you're like, well, that's that warlord out of the game then, because
mm,
it can't turn around quickly enough. It's so limited. Or you're just saying, well, that part of the board is unusable by that warlord, so that's a bit, but that's particularly dense terrain, and AT is such a movement focused thing. But your
yeah,
point there about it's a lot lower skill level, it just becomes a very different kind of, frankly, fairly dull kind of game if it's
yeah,
completely open. But I take your point. That's a good one about playing and mixing it up, having a collection that allows you to try different things at different times. I think that's quite a good point.
yeah. And I find if I run an event,
Mm.
personally, like so, tournament 40k at the moment is standardized terrain across 3 or 4 different standards. I hate it with a passion.
Really?
I
As strong as that? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's dull. It's
Yeah.
boring. It's so and you're playing the same game. Like, cool, I'm on this table. It's the same terrain as I played on every other table. The
Yeah. Okay.
scenario's
Yeah.
changed a little bit, but you can. I get it as a strategic challenge, kind of thing. Knowing all
Mm,
the variables, all that. Like you're playing chess rather than playing, Risk, right?
mm, mm,
Okay, I understand that, but as a game of Warhammer where there's a story, where there's not even necessarily a story, but just something more than just the numbers. Like,
mm,
oh, this table's terrain setup's a bit different. Okay, right. I can't just use the tactic that I've been practicing for the last 3 months. I I have to adjust and I have to change, and
mm,
sometimes it will be slightly in my favour, and sometimes it won't. But I will have to utilise my skill to make it work in my favour. Um, yeah, again, everything's on a spectrum. The other end of that spectrum is the terrain absolutely 100% favours one side of the table, you win the roll off to see who's deploying where, you take it, you win the game. You don't want that either. But I mean, I remember playing South Coast GT donkeys years ago against Dave Fraser and his dwarfs, bless him, and I placed a building to break up one of the deployment zones. And he kind of went, well, everyone always puts in Warhammer, everyone always puts the buildings like randomly, like where they want it. He's like, but they'd probably be near each other. So he put one like near the other one to make it look right. And it was like, okay, cool. And I'll put something like nearby. And yeah, was it the most advantageous thing for him to do? He didn't know who was going to get that side either. So whatever. It's not necessarily that aspect of it, but it made the table look better. And it's just variety. Tournaments, GW tournament games in general, and big events have become much more standardized over the years, and I find it dull.
I can see the thinking behind it, because it is tending that particular game to minimize, and I'm cautious about that word, the role of terrain. It makes the terrain a factor so that you've got the various rules that terrain imposes or brings to interact with your units. But really, the focus on those types of games is the interaction of the units themselves. And as you say, it's more about the mechanics. Certainly, it is more so than about telling
Yeah,
a story or otherwise. You are playing a game for its
but you can.
mechanics, not driving a narrative.
I think you can do both.
I agree.
Without having to have every table symmetrical. It's not even necessarily that there are set maps. Like that's nothing new, but those maps being absolutely symmetrical is like two big L's in the middle of the table. Great. So you're going to run your unit up to. I can tell you what the battle plan is, and then you vary it based on what you've got. Like the principles to it don't really change, and I appreciate that. You don't want your event to be the one where the person who comes second goes, well, it was all right, but the last game, the terrain screwed me, I couldn't win. And it's like, whether that's true or not, that then gets portrayed. So that's not
It's not a
ideal.
great feeling. No. Do you think as a
But they
tournament?
do.
Do you think it's
Sorry, they do
yeah? Carry
play
on.
some of them play a place terrain, and I think that's possibly worse because then you are
Yeah,
absolutely placing
yeah.
a piece of terrain to your advantage, and it's like, but I can't stand that either. But
Well, then that's problematic depending on what terrain is in the collection. Yeah.
It's hey, it
Would
is
do you
what it is.
think an event? I wasn't going to mention event, but you've gone into it. I think it's quite a good one. Do you think it's a good thing at events to have a range? Assuming you're moving around, say it's a 2 day, like we're going to be doing a 2 day thing with 5 games, and you're moving from table to table, and the tables can be wildly different. Where you can have one
Yeah,
that's
I think it's
very heavily
perfect.
densely terrain, the next one
Um,
is a really open desert-like
I
thing.
Yeah, maybe not to the extremes, but yes,
Mm,
fundamentally yes.
mm,
If you did that, if you said that to again, I'm just going to use 40k right because it's the competitive game, but it applies to Age of Sigmar and whatever else you want to play. But if I know that there are, if I say, let's talk, let's keep it heresy. I'm playing Titanicus, or we're going to an event, and we know that all the terrain is going to look similar. Okay, cool. I can plan, and I could choose an army that I think is going to work really well there. If I go and know there's 3 or 4 levels of tables from highly dense urban areas to fairly open um, areas with cliff faces or woods or whatever, okay, so I need a force. I need to either say, you know what, if I luck out and avoid, or if my luck fails and I get 2 open games, I might be struggling with my army.
mm,
Or I say, cool, I need an army that can cope in a dense terrain, an open terrain, and maybe it softens the edges of those extreme
mm.
mana pool builds as well. Like, is Exterminus terrible? No. Is it? It's certainly strong in certain areas, and maybe we see a few of them because it's the 3 big dudes. I'm not saying this is the case, but maybe we want to temper that a bit by then having. Oh, you might be playing on a quite dense table, so your Exterminus is at a slight disadvantage. Maybe you don't go for the.
Mm.
Um, and on the other side of that, more open table, or Audax is going to struggle
Mm.
because they might not be able to use their mana pool, which allows them to scout forwards out of sight and blah 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 like that. And maybe just tempering those extremes becomes
Mm.
a good thing. But ultimately, for me, it's about variety, right? If I was to go to multiple events over the course of the year and they were all the same, I would find it dull. And I
Mm.
know metas change, but that's not enough for me. I want to try different. I get fed up with the fact that um, I look at going to an Age of Sigmar event or a 40k event. They're all 2,000 points, and they're
Mm.
all GW straight out of the book. Build your armies. Back in the day before Hammer Fantasy Battle, didn't change a huge amount, but there was like, oh, this one's 2,500, this one's 2,000, this one's 2,250. We're using Swedish comp. We're using this. This one gives you everyone a free giant. Like,
Mm.
cool. Like, it's just more fun. Maybe
Mm.
people would disagree with me, but
But it depends what you're going for, isn't it? I mean, it's
yeah,
the idea of people are trying to almost standardize it so
yeah,
that it becomes more like a sport. So that
yeah.
there is
But
a
you don't.
desire to be like that.
But okay, let's take cricket. Every Test match you play is played on a completely different surface.
Yeah,
Completely different surface.
yeah, okay, you could do that, but then even if you take that as a tennis or otherwise like that, it's still to a standard set of rules. It's a
Yeah, but
standardized game.
um, yeah, but cricket, like, so what's going on in India at the moment is England have picked 3 spinners for a cricket match. You only do that in India or Sri Lanka, and you don't always do it at every Indian or Sri Lankan event. The challenge is different, and you have to read it, and you have to work out, and you have to say, we're going out there, we're going to take this balance of players, and
Mm.
we're going to hope we've got all our bases covered. If we come up and actually this one isn't a turning wicket and we need more pace, then we're going to have those options available. Football, yeah, there's a standard, there's a variety. Well, there's a, a certain maximum and minimum width and length for pace. But you know what? Some clubs move their hoardings in so they're closer to the edges of the pitch, so there's less room on the outside for throw-ons and things like that. The um, the weather plays a
Mm.
part in all that as well. They might be intentional, it might not be intentional, but a golf, like you go and play on a links where the wind's blowing in off the sea, you go, and then you go to a place that's on chalk downs and the ball bounces hard no matter what the kind of weather it is, and then you go and play in a desert. Like they offer you different challenges. I yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
maybe it's me.
uh,
Some people like it. So for me,
I
I
can
think
see why.
there's
I
a
can see why
loss.
someone would want to go down that route. I don't think that's going to be for everyone. It just means you're just seeking a different thing. I
I think
think
it's easy. I
that's fine.
also think it's standardization creates less issues, so it
Yes.
becomes easier for um, event organisers to just go, I don't want the hassle,
Mm.
and I don't blame them. I don't agree with it. I don't like it, but I I understand the nature of that beast. But
Mm.
the only other thing I want to say was types of terrain on the battlefield. How many 40k games have you played that haven't been in a massed urbanized area? Or
Yeah.
heresy games, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very few.
I agree.
But you know what? Put some trees in there. Put a park area in your game. Right? Trees offer different cover, different rules than a ruin does. Like, yes, you
I
need line
agree.
of sight blockers to break things up, but try different terrain. One of my favourite events I've ever done was at Adepticon. I did a Zone Mortalis event. There were zero. What you consider as a Zone Mortalis table, there might have been 2 tables like that.
Mm.
I played on a almost completely open board. It was, um, it was supposed to be high up on rocks, and you were moving between these like really high areas. But the zone mortalis aspect of it was high winds. So if you
Interesting.
moved jump troops, they would scatter like from where you ended it because the wind would blow them off course slightly,
Yeah.
right? And things like that. Brilliant, different. Like zone mortalis doesn't have to be in a ship. Like, in fact, in the original Zone Mortalis, you can have a normal game of Heresy, and part of that game can be a Zone Mortalis area.
Yeah, because it's the area that's
Yeah,
just super deadly. So, oh dear,
yeah,
that area is collapsing.
Yeah,
or
that
that area
area's
is under bombardment.
or that area's got gas leaks. That
Mm,
area's got like carnivorous plants. That area's got like you name it. Like there is so much to do within the game
mm.
that when you just see the same thing over and over again, and particularly outside of tournaments when you get to narrative events, crack on, like go for it, try stuff. I use the old black books had lots of terrain rules, and I used to throw them in like into games, and people would be like, "Wow, these are amazing! Where they, how'd you come up with that?" I'm like, "Just stole it out of the book."
Dan's particular question. I mean, I know it's coming from a place where he has accumulated. He's a big Necromunda player, and he's accumulated a considerable amount of Necromunda terrain.
Hmm.
But that's not to say he's got. I mean, yes, he does have a proportion of sort of Zone Mortalis like stuff. Given that Necromunda, contemporary Necromunda, can play in two ways. You play it in either Sector Mechanicus, sort of standard 3D 40k ish
Yeah,
type board, or the Zone Mortalis type board. Fine. But they also they've mixed that up. And in the club that he and I have played in, they will have quite open industrial boards with carnivorous plants because Necromunda's got
cool.
a lot of, I mean, there's a full scenario with that, and he's got terrain pieces to represent that. Therefore, going back to his question, what role does it play or how significant a role? It feels like variety, particularly for a personal collection
Mm,
that you're working with. The more you can introduce variety into that to allow you to vary games, it's always what sort of put me off having my own collection of terrain, and I've now started to dabble in that as space has allowed. Is to be able to, I mean, for example, if you were playing with a regular group of people, you were putting a campaign together, you would want to be able to represent different areas and have different
yeah,
games. Playing in the same city, for example, it doesn't appeal in the same way as making that a bigger, grander scale campaign
or
where
or
you could
even
mix it up.
or even just having the city, the undercity, the outskirts of the
Yeah,
city, the
absolutely.
factories. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's all within one area, four different types of boards,
yeah,
and that's where terrain really helps you tell a story and helps your
yeah,
narrative.
yeah.
And
And
then
I think
what
it
you
really
can do with
contributes to
that,
that. Yeah,
yeah, what you can do with that, if you then want to go on, because a lot of the narrative events we do and like narrative gaming we do isn't really narrative, it's themed. And there's a big
yeah,
difference. If you really want to go narrative and you lay your board out, okay, cool, there's a terminal on that piece of terrain. What should we say that does? All right,
yeah.
it opens up a whole host of different things. So yeah, terrain is maybe it's something we have to look at covering, and I need to get better with my terrain, sorting out
It's
stuff.
tricky. It is
Mm.
tricky with a home collection because it's a lot of work
Exposing,
to
yeah.
make terrain. You can we are blessed
3D
with
printers,
it
baby.
being more available. Yeah, exactly. But it being more available in
Yeah,
more varied ways, more exciting ways than ever before. But it's still a thing. I mean, even with 3D print, you're going to paint it,
oh
you're
yeah,
going to theme it. I mean, it's got an expense to it. There are cheaper versions, very laser cut things or homemade stuff. But then you've got a lot of work in making them look
yeah.
perhaps the way you want to. And then you've got to store it all. It's a different thing with a club. It's a different mentality. Again, you've got
Oh,
to make
big
stuff
time.
sure it's durable and everything else. But in terms of your game experience, I think it's absolutely key.
Mm.
And like you, I've done that before where we've been arranging games at the club and similar. And I particularly Legions or playing Epic in the past. There was an OCD in me. I had to, if you were creating a town or whatever, a built up area, that had to be, you couldn't just scatter buildings, which you sometimes see hundreds of meters apart from each other. It's like, no, this needs
Yeah,
to be a settlement over here. This needs to be an open area. This needs to be a rocky area, organized that way rather than this sort of oddly distributed type of thing, which of course you do also get, but it just felt I needed to create something to say, okay, this is a town that we're attacking, or a village, or a little group, or settlement, or something. Um, it clearly does drive part of the engagement with the game, and I mean, people use the term immersion and things like that. Depends what you're playing for, playing the game with in mind. But I think it's an essential part to it, and not least of which because it changes the game. It can change the game fundamentally, but that
yeah,
variety seems to be I would have said would be the strongest thing to push for in a collection.
yeah, for sure. Okay, let's move on. Second question from there.
Question 2. From the Age of Darkness box set, what would be a minimum force needed for a basic intro game? Now, I answered that question when he and I were chatting about it because I thought, well, that seems a strangely straightforward question. But he then expanded on that to be when he says a basic intro game, he means something that perhaps gives us a taste of a variety of the rules, of a taste of what the overall game experience could be. Because I said, well, HQ and 2 troops choices, job done. That's quite straightforward, isn't it? And he, well, yeah, but does the exclusion of vehicles give me an intro to the game?
I think for an intro, you don't necessarily need everything anyway.
It's unlikely you'd be able to get it. You're going to include flyers? No.
Yeah, I think, in fact, yeah, you could easily just not have first game, don't have vehicle. It's fine. Like have what is in that. Like when we went out to for the to look at the rules, play our intro games for the reveal weekend. We played with, what did we have? We had the start set without the Spartan, basically, and we used those rules. And you learnt reactions, you learnt moving, you learnt shooting, you learnt combat. Excuse me. You learnt how characters interact, weapon types, dreadnoughts. There's enough there to learn without worrying about vehicles. Then you add on vehicles. Then you add on flyers. Then you add on Primarchs. What have
And
you?
I don't feel, obviously vehicles being a significant portion of the game and transports and similar. I don't think, particularly not if it's an intro game and even the early games, you're not losing something where, oh, I've missed a massive part of this game. There's still a lot of fun to be had. I mean, speaking to that point, I played a game when our friend Stu was moving halfway across the world. We played. I went over to his house because he was getting out all the toys, everything, massive gaming weekend. Absolutely everything he owned. There was another friend bringing his enormous collection of word bearers. It was going to be tens of thousands of points per side. That was the whole Saturday, Sunday planned out. Friday night, we just played a sort of Zone Mortalis type version of game with a couple of squads each and a character. I enjoyed that as much as the enormous game. Now, obviously, mechanics things are on the other side, but that core game was hugely enjoyable with just a few infantry units running around. If you can capture the imagination with that and get into those core mechanics, are you missing a flavour of the game? No, I don't think you are, because you're just learning the first part of the game, perhaps. I would agree with that.
Yeah, you don't have to learn. I think that's a big part of it. You don't, whenever you're learning any game, you don't have to learn everything all at once. Yeah,
No.
get the basics. And actually, tank vehicles aren't that tricky. So,
No.
like they move fairly freely now. You know, you're not turning, you're not like they used to, anything like that. So in old editions, yeah, they've got an armor value rather than the wounds. Like that's just not much more than that. At the end of the day, intro games, you're not worried about the intricacies of emergency disembarkments and things like that. Like just make it work. Just play the game, get a feel for the game. So I don't think that's an issue.
It also depends on the level of intro game. I mean, isn't it the trope is that if you're in a Games Workshop and you're a certain age, it'll be everything hits and kills on a 4+. I mean, you're just getting used to moving stuff around and rolling 4+. You don't need the intricacies of save modifiers or APs and all the rest. You could simplify it down considerably before you get even into just using the actual rules of the models in front of you.
Sure. Okay. Next.
So I don't think, as you say, you didn't need the big vehicles even in the Age of Darkness box set in its entirety. You could cut that down. Yeah. His third and final question was on the assumption that all 18 Primarchs will get a second model. How would you see those that didn't make it to Terra being depicted?
Who knows? Whatever they feel like doing at the end of the day.
That somehow, because I would be working on the assumption that this continues to be a setting, not an ongoing narrative.
Yeah.
So you could easily jump around in time frames, and as soon as you can jump around in time frames, there's plenty you could do.
It was just the models he was asking about, wasn't it? Rather than
yes,
rules. Yeah. Like, okay, The only thing I'm thinking you might get is Gilliman won't be in a static pose next time.
Yes.
I think anyone who's got the really more static poses won't be in static poses. They'll be in fighting poses. That's
And
my only feeling.
do you think that those that are in fighting poses will get a more static pose?
Not necessarily.
No, no.
I think there's less clamour about that.
Mm.
I think you might get. I think maybe with Fulgrim and Corax, you'll get much more standard posing. Oh, you won't get
Mm.
Fulgrim because he's a demon.
I was going to
With
say
Corax
you've done
and
him. Yeah.
yeah, with Corax, I think you'll get a much more kind of a running pose or in combat pose rather than a descending from the skies pose. But Angron, demon, you got to think Mortarion, demon, Magnus, interesting one because Magnus demon is same as Magnus potentially, or whatever you want.
Yes.
Who else we got? Perturabo, fairly static. Maybe he'll be in a an attacking pose or something like
Mm.
that.
Mm.
Who else is there? Bad guys. Horus we've done. Fulgrim we've done.
Lorgar.
Alpharis,
Lorgar, you get the powered up version of
Lorgar.
Lorgar.
Yeah, you probably would. Which is not much different from Lorgar, but again, I could see him being just more dynamic in pose. Same.
Yeah.
Alpharis isn't bad. I mean, Alpharis you could do lots of things with. On the good side of things, Dawn attacking with his blade, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Guilliman again, like a full Avenging Suns Guilliman would be really
Yeah.
cool. Russ, um, you know what? I would love to see contemplative Russ.
Russ, funny enough, I was exactly the same. The barbarian king on a throne would be
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. Well, I don't think it would be that, but that
I mean,
feel,
that's
yeah,
too much of a trope, but you know what I
that
mean.
feel like leg up on a dead body, kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
overseeing something would be amazing, like hair blowing back, something like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Khan, I suspect, will be on a bike. Um, because we've seen now with Fulgrim, they're prepared to go bigger with the models.
I think if there is a bigger option, as there is with the Khan, as there is with the demons, I think they'll take it. I don't think you just see
No, yeah,
another version in addition to
no.
the kind of crazy
But there's
version.
only the only one that's different for loyalists, really. There's only one. Like Khan's the only one who can be modelled with extra or as different. So
Yes.
he gets his bike on the back. Yeah, on the traitor side, you got the demons, Primarchs, and all that. Sort of almost a shame that Perturabo doesn't fall till the scouring because I don't think
Yes.
we'll get a demonic version of him.
You could
Um,
get a version of him in a tank. him as a tank commander popping at the top of the note. It'd be.
would be an interesting one what they do.
Well, I wondered if you go
But
much earlier. You could almost. Well, it's not the Horus Heresy, then, is it? It's not the Age of Darkness if you're
it's
doing
fine
Crusade
having
era.
it's fine to have Crusade eras. That's sort of
Although
fine.
no, I wonder if that's
But
what
what's
you do with
different?
them. Yeah,
What's
true.
different? Is he's still the same guy? Maybe charging forward, showing um, his lack of control, his anger.
Mm, mm, mm.
I'm trying to think who else there is. Yeah, so Corax, more standardized fighting pose. Vulcan. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Like, I just think whatever Sam feels like doing. Frankly,
I feel like the loyalists are by far the harder
yeah.
the one to do. I mean, the ones that are more static and more contemplative, or more stoic, are the
Uh,
easy ones to sort of do as
yeah.
a variant. But the ones that are already there, I think you're right.
Dawn Gilliman and Kurz, I think would be fairly not simple, but there's lots of options like to make
Mm,
them more dynamic and then have a bike on the other one.
mm,
The Lion, like I say, Russ, I'd like to see more static. I think would be
mm.
amazing for Russ. Who else we got? Then you got the Lion, Ferris, Sanguinius.
Sanguinius is a bit like Corax. You could see a version of him on the rock,
Yeah,
something like that,
uh,
as standing, looking out, kind of thing. I mean, there's even the image of him on the cover. I mean, he's on a lot of covers, but him on the cover of the second Siege book.
yeah,
Just
proper regal. Right,
yeah, exactly.
proper
Holding a
defender of
spear.
terror. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
a glorious leader.
Yeah, yeah. Because his
Could be
current
really
model
cool.
even works as a sort of duel with Horus. I mean,
Yeah,
that's fine. It's just trying to think of a variant that gives you something that the current one doesn't.
yeah.
Um,
I mean,
I think that is
Vulcan.
harder with some of the others. Vulcan and Ferris, I think that's harder to think up because they're in
Yeah,
pretty classic poses.
I'd have Ferris like running forwards, like full on.
Yeah.
I've lost my patience, shall we say? Like,
Well chosen there. I mean, the
yeah,
alternative is that for those two is have them at the forge, but I mean, these are models that you're going to use in a
yeah,
game.
that's not. Yeah,
It's not them in a, it's not like the artwork where the
yeah,
interesting artwork with them out of their armor. You're not going to get that.
exactly.
Obviously,
If
no
you were
way.
just doing if you were doing like painting models rather than gaming
Yeah,
models, then
yeah,
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 Russ on a throne would be amazing with like one of the walls at his feet or what have
yeah,
you,
yeah.
and you could do all that kind of stuff. But they're not. That's not gaming piece.
No,
Cool. All right.
that was all of his questions. Did you have some as
Wonderful.
well?
We have plenty, so we will crack on because time is flying. Let's go to Instagram. Blefarius. Quick rules clarification. If I outflank in a rhino headhunters, is it the rhino that gets intercepted as soon as it comes on, or can the squad be targeted once I disembark or intercept? Basically, when does the reaction kick in? Because it's a little bit wibbly wobbly, isn't it?
Mm,
So each reserve action is rolled for as a group. Blah 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 blah. Um, the following processes are intended to clarify the process of performing certain reserve actions to make clear the possible actions. Okay, so deep strike. They must select whether they come in, zoom, or hover. Number 2, final position. You work out then disordered or not. Number 3, take pinning test. Number 4, reactive player must select the interceptor advanced reaction targeting any unit that has been placed on the battlefield. Number 5, a unit embarked on a model with a transport may disembark.
okay.
So that says following processes. So we can only assume that it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in order. And if you look at flanking assault, number 4, reactive player may select to make the interceptor advanced reaction targeting any unit that has been placed on the battlefield as part of the flanking assault. A unit embarked on a model. Number 5, a unit embarked on a model with the transport type. As long as the model blah 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 move no more, they can disembark. Drop pod assault. Uh, Drop pod assault slightly different. So 3, any unit is embarked on a Legion drop pod that has been deployed as part of the drop pod assault man must now disembark. Number 4, reactive player may select to make the interceptor advanced reaction. So drop pod assault, they get out and then you choose which unit you shoot.
Mm-hmm.
Deep strike assault and flanking assault. If you come on, so I'm assuming, yeah, is outflank he's specifically asking about. You have to shoot the rhino because it's at step 4 and step 5 is then models getting out. So actually outflanking does have that bit of protection. If you can somehow outflank a land raider, a Spartan, then you're giving yourself quite a lot of protection to that unit.
That's interesting that that's so different
Yeah,
to a drop pod because you would, I
yeah.
mean, sort of just thinking about it sort of narratively, that the mechanic is so different. I mean,
Ah,
you would imagine something that driving up is going to give you more opportunity to shoot it than a thing falling out of the sky, or maybe it isn't. Maybe that you've got just as much
well, the
opportunity
only
moving
difference,
fast. Tricky.
yeah, main charge. So, potential difference here. So you've got drop pod assault. Units that disembark from a model with the assault vehicle special rule in step 3 of the drop pod assault may charge in the following assault phase as an exception to the assault vehicle special rule. So they get out and then they get shot and then you can charge. So in flanking assault, you get shot, then you get out. Units that have disembarked from a model in the assault vehicle step rule in step 5 of the flanking assault process may not charge in the following assault phase in accordance. Now, that not is it supposed to be there? Because it says in accordance with the assault vehicle special rule. So it's kind of sort of contradictory, but would explain why you could get out
It's
differently
kind of annoying that the two aren't
because it's the same wording
broadly
for deep strike.
consistently. Yeah.
So if you deep strike, you can't get out and charge.
Mm.
Flanking sort, I can't remember exactly if this has been covered anywhere else. So that's, yeah, the wording on that paragraph is not good, unless we look at sort of.
Also,
To be fair,
the fact that it's not consistent across the three, I find a pain.
well,
There
yeah,
may
but
well be, it may be a very good intentive. There may be intent behind that reason that they're different, but I
yeah,
find that slightly irritating.
but it adds weight to the fact that you then can't. Passengers disembarking from access points on a vehicle with a special rule can charge on the turn they do so, including when forced to make emergency disembark, unless the vehicle has arrived from reserves that turn. So that's why it is saying that. It's just so, yeah, it's in the rules. You can't do that. However, drop pods allow
Okay.
you to do it. Uh, so yeah, it's fairly clear once you look through the wording. And I just had to
So you
double
need to
check
look at
myself.
the rules in their both locations to kind of determine it. And I
Yeah,
suppose that's the kind of the point, isn't it? Drop pods give you the benefit that you can assault, but you are more vulnerable to shooting in the process. Whereas the vehicles give you greater level of protection because it's only the vehicles that can be shot. However, they are shot before before the
yeah.
transported unit disembarks, so they may suffer from the.
It means you can shoot. So yeah. So
Mm,
you
mm,
so for headhunters works fine. Come on in
mm,
your rhino, get shot, then get out if your rhino's still there,
mm,
and then you can shoot. So it's not bad.
mm.
Not bad at all. Okie dokie.
An interesting
Mini,
one because it feels like that's quite a widely used one. Interesting to see how those
yeah.
interactions take place.
Mini Painter Scotland. If time and money were no object, which force would you build for 30k? And painting ability and anything else. No objects. I'm going to add those caveats. What would you do?
Hmm. I would. Well, I mean, that's just silly because the what I'd be. My immediate thought is to have a fairly typical force of all 18 legions. But that seems like that's a cheat because just to
That's
say,
not
I'd like
one.
them all, please. It's not one. I'd like them
That's not
all,
one
please.
force. Yeah.
In which case, a single force with money, no object, it would probably be Mechanicum.
Yeah. Cool.
I would probably
Mine
be Mechanicum because I think that is one of the most time intensive.
taking everything into account, as in nothing of anything. Do you think Mechanicum's time intensive? Yeah.
Mm,
No, I don't know. Building them maybe.
that's what I'm talking about.
Mine would be so. I've always had a love for Rough Riders, even when they weren't that great in 40k. I've never really used them. I would want some kind of army with about 60 Rough Riders in. I would also love them to put rules in for commissar equivalents on
Yeah, that would be
horses
awesome.
because just why not? I've wanted to do it in 40k for donkey's years, and I never would because metal models for starters and the Attilians,
That's an
bless them,
interesting way
the
of
new
looking at
ones.
that question as well, because I've taken it from the perspective of saying, I would find it, where am I going to save the maximum amount of time almost to think a Mechanicum force with lots of fiddly little models potentially and lots of largely resin models that are going to be being used there, which perhaps aren't going to change anytime soon. It's both expensive, quite complex modeling challenges from resin vehicles through to resin infantry with lots of fiddly little bits. I'm thinking, yeah, it's going to take a long time. And then to do them justice painting wise, you could really lean into that with candy schemes and weathering and all sorts of stuff. Whereas you've gone a different route, which is that I would suggest you've gone a different route to say, I'm probably not going to do this, but if time and money were no object and I could snap my fingers, this is a thing I might do. It's a slightly more unusual idea, which I think is that's just
I
quite
think
a
yeah, I
cool
think
cool way
my
of
idea
taking
works
it.
for both. I
Mm,
think you building some Mechanicum when you can take things like Thanatars. How many dudes
mm,
do
mm,
you get for each Thanatar?
mm,
If you were to paint them up, how you're talking as well, like building a
mm,
plastic dude might be quicker than building an Ursarax, but you need quite a few more dudes than you need per
mm, mm,
Ursarax. So yeah, who knows? And Mechanicum also have flat panels, like in a lot of places, whereas
mm.
dudes have skin and textures and additional bits added on, and So, but hey, either way,
I
that's
would
what
say
I would do.
textures is probably easier than large flat panels, personally. But
Well,
yeah,
it depends how you're painting them, I suppose.
true,
Um,
true.
the fact is, you could, even if you're painting them well, you can airbrush a Mechanicum Army and get all of your base coat down, and it covers a lot more than humans.
Hmm. It is tempting to do some of those more esoteric human regiments that you hear about. I mean, some of the is it the Black Sentinels, the guys that you tend to hear about with are associated with the Astronomicon, or
Yeah,
those guys. There's a few of those that are mentioned in some of the background books, um, doing interesting things that I think,
yeah.
yeah, actually that would be quite fun to do some of those.
Although,
But
if time and money were no object, maybe I'd do like an all Praetorian army, all metal models, all infantry with all the injured dudes, and then sell it, and then have that money. Thank you very much. Um, cool. Team Minority. What events are you most looking forward to receiving campaign books for in the future? Pure
Ooh,
wish listing and why?
I've always liked Talon. I
Yeah,
think
I
seeing
think
that
Talon's.
expanded, I think Talon would be a really cool one.
I think we'll get that in LI.
Yes, I think we will. I think it absolutely lends itself to it.
Yeah.
Combined arms, massive tank battles. Yeah, I mean, the scale of it is perfect for that. I quite enjoyed. I was going back over some of the black books the other day in anticipation of the Solar Auxiliary. And we're trying to think, well, what do I do? I've got these Solar Auxiliary with legions. What shall I do with them? Let me read up a bit more on these, and got really kind of into it. The whole thing, sort of around Port Moore and the fall of Port Moore,
Yeah.
fairly early on, that was quite cool. It's fairly early on in the heresy as well. There's a lot of confusion, but the sort of destruction and loss of the battle fleets around there, and then what you could do with that, and then the worlds that followed, and the campaign you could do a multi-world campaign system, be quite fun. Um,
But part of the problem for me here is we've had 9 black books that have covered 9 major, well, 6 major incidents and some other less like traditionally major incidents, but still
mm,
big like Paramount and what have you. So you've covered a lot of ground in those already, which can be covered again, but I'm not like desperately itching for them because I've had them in a black book style.
mm, mm,
Others, won't have those, and that's fair enough. Uh, I honestly think Games Workshop as a whole does its best work when it takes a line, takes a name, takes an area, and then expands it in a way where there's no pre-set things
mm.
going on. We'll talk about this later, but I think almost all their best work comes when they expand on something that hasn't been expanded. It hasn't been pushed before. So
Yes.
maybe okay. So maybe I want Space Wars involved because I love Space Wars. So maybe give me more information on the Alexis cluster.
Yeah. It does feel like it wants to be something that hasn't been covered at all before. I mean, that's kind of why I'm finding the two books that we're going to have coming at different scales dealing with Beta Garmin is exciting
Yeah,
because that hasn't been covered before. And
not
by
not
a
not
gaming
hugely.
book,
No. Yeah.
no, well, arguably not that great deal by the novels, but even the idea of covering something there and, as you say,
Yeah.
expanding on it, that
Or
is
maybe
appealing.
I could tell you what you could do. You could have like I suppose maybe there's too many, but you could almost have if they wanted to do a Zone Mortalis book and expand on Zone Mortalis, they could have a great ship battles kind of thing and pull
Mm,
bits
mm.
from where did the Imperial
File.
Fists fight? But yeah, Fal, Alexis, where the Space Wolves and the Alpha Legion were fighting against each other. Just for that scene when Alpharius goes on to Hrafnakol or whatever, however it's pronounced, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm cool," and then Russ senses he's there, looks right at him, and he goes, "Yeah, I'm not cool. I'm not cool. He's not supposed to know I'm here." Um,
Mm.
but yeah, but I think I like surprise me with something amazing. Um,
Yes. I think the ones that would appeal are the multi-legion ones as well. Because I was just thinking of similar,
Yeah.
thinking, oh, which are something like, Cygnus or some of those, and but the
I
ones that
mean,
are a
the
bit
only
more
other,
mono-dimensional, I find are not, or two-dimensional,
the
are,
only,
are less appealing. I think the really more complex theatres seem to be quite appealing.
or give me a Saturnine Wall Catacombs book.
Yes,
Like it would
i.e.,
be
straight into the
smaller.
siege. Yeah.
It would be smaller, like because the siege. Yeah, don't know. Yeah, I don't want a siege book, but give me a Saturnine Wall book, which features, I don't know, trying to break a wall down on top, and then the catacombs underneath, and more Zone Mortalis rules in respect to that.
Mm.
But it's fairly limited in scope. But who knows? It's just a super cool fight. Right, Derek, bruv, what would you like, or do you think they might take the book series into the scouring? And if they do, will it make sense for the game to go that way too? After we get Siege of Terror book, which includes Demon Primarchs, Possessed, blah blah blah, would you be happy to play Heresy rules using Mark 7 Armor Marines set during the scouring, either around tactical squads and possibly a chapter, blah 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 blah. Okay. Basically, scouring Mark 7, would you play it? Essentially, tactical squads and whatever. Um, like,
Scouring, I think, it would be an interesting expansion. Yeah.
so book series, I think he's talking about Black Library. Um,
Mm.
so how am I going to answer this? Games Workshop need something to replace the Heresy with. Out of all the options, there are plenty of cool options that you could dive into in 40k that we don't know a huge amount about. Age of Apostasy being one, like they did it with Beast Rises, but there's loads of snippets,
There's
cool
loads.
aspects, loads, so
Certainly on the
many.
same scale as Beast Rises, there's
Yeah,
loads of them.
yeah.
Yeah, that go right through that 10,000 years. Yeah.
There is one like that is like I don't want them to do Unification Wars, and I don't think they will as a big thing. I think they will dip into Unification Wars every now and then, but I don't want them to do it personally. There is one standout period of time, and it's the
Mm.
scouring, where A, it has Primarch Cell. B, it has some of the most important things to happen outside of the heresy. You have the Iron Cage and Dawn
Mm.
disappearing. You have, I try to remember exact timelines, but you have Caliban. You
Mm.
have other Primarchs disappearing. Trying to remember if Guilliman versus Fulgrim is part of the scouring or if it's later. It might be
I think
later.
it's quite a bit later, but yeah,
Yeah, I
and
think you might be right.
I
But
think
you've got the
Alfaris
whole
does some interesting things. Yeah, I think that's quite a bit later.
you've got the whole aspect of the legions, Chaos Legions, coping with what's happening. Uh, you've got like the word bearers, like how do we get from where they were pre Horus telling Lorgar to get lost to where they are in 40k? Like, what's that gap in between? And we've seen that short story where Corax is hunting, like Demon Corax or whatever he is, Warp Shadow Corax is hunting Lorgar. You've got that. You've got the descent of the Iron Warriors.
Mm.
Um, you've got
You've
you've
got all
got
the
the
traitor legions
tensions.
turning on each other.
Yeah, you've got all the tensions of Guilliman trying to make sure this never happens again, whilst also Russ and the Lion handle the fact that they weren't there, and Dawn handling the fact that they weren't there as well, and Dawn
Mm.
fighting Guilliman to say, like, our Legion wasn't a problem, you lot can get lost,
Mm.
as well as Khan. And going through what he's going to go through, you've got the Imperium having to deal with the fact that the Emperor is pretty much dead. There's no Sigilite anymore. Malcador's not there. Um, the
The rebuilding
Empire
of the
is
the
broken.
building of the Imperium. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
for a novel series, the Scouring has way more than anything else, and it has the scope that none of the others have. Like, for all that they are important, the Scouring has the biggest scope.
And while that is interesting in itself, because that speaks to the thing you were talking about a minute ago about they're at their best. They, Games Workshop, and their creatives are at their best when they're sort of given almost an open sandpit, which we don't know much about. However, it's going to be appealing to go and do something where there are some tentpole moments that you can then put other things around,
We also,
like you're talking about. And the scouring has got the most of those, and it's an appealing period. So I think it's likely they will do it.
and it's not much different than the heresy in that, yes, we know
No,
certain events happen, but we don't know much about how or why or who or whatever
no,
within
no.
those. They touched on aspects of it. Um, yeah, so you need to replace that series with a big enough series, and that's the next big series they've got. So I'd be astounded if they didn't, like, from the start. Also, we'll get onto later, like the heresy. Officially their viewpoint was always the heresy ends when the emperor's put on the golden throne. It's like, well, that leaves an awful lot of story to tell,
Mm,
which heresy fans are going to be like, I've seen it. It's like, oh, really, like, why didn't we get all these stories? And it's like, hold on, like, people moaned that the Lord of the Rings film had 4 endings. Like,
mm,
um, the last part of the End of the Death Part 3, there's a considerable amount of looking at other people once the Emperor is interned on the Golden Throne.
mm, mm,
You want another whole book, which it would have to be, of dealing with all the fallout of Russ getting back, of Guilliman actually, kind of sitting down
Again,
and
at
working out what's
terror. Yeah.
happening. Yeah, of Cat's the hero, of the Khan, of and that's just good guys I'm naming. So
Mm.
yeah, like copious amounts of stories. Okay. Would you be happy to play a heresy rule set using Mark 7 Marine set during the scouring? Yeah, cool. I'm pretty chill. Like, whatever.
No, I agree completely because I think it is it feels like it's not a sequel, but it's got that sort of
Yeah,
feel like it's a continuation of that
nice.
without
Yeah,
turning into something else. It's not codified. So yes,
yeah. It could be 1 year after the heresy. Like,
yeah, exactly.
exactly. And possibly a chapter instead of a legion. I think the implementation of the codex probably doesn't happen during the
No, it's not
scouring.
because that's the
No,
second
it's,
founding.
it's yeah, which is once they've settled, like, you can't
Mm.
go doing that whilst you're also trying to chase all those elements out.
No,
So I think
I
that is a
can't tell
separate
you
aspect.
when this. I couldn't tell you when the second
No,
founding is, but it's quite a bit later. I
because
thought.
I mean, Guilliman and Dawn have quite a big fight
Yes,
about, like, not
a
wanting to
political
do
one.
it. Uh, the second founding happen. Should we see if Google's got an answer? Seven
I'm doing
standard
this
years
thing.
after the end of the Heresy.
Oh, it's much
So
sooner than I thought. Okay. Hmm.
7 standard years. Yeah, but I don't know how the scouring. Like, how long did the scouring last? I don't know the end point of that.
No.
So, um, yeah, plenty of. Uh, you've got to deal with Mars still. Like,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Because I mean,
uh,
where does the Dark Mechanicum? Do they just up and leave Holy Mars?
yeah,
Seems unlikely.
so plenty of stuff going on.
Hmm.
It lasted for an unknown period of time in the early 31st millennium. Is talk about it lasting 107 years after the death of Horus. Don't know. That's something
Hmm.
I'm not as up on. There's, like, details of all
I
that.
wouldn't be surprised to find it's not. It's not defined.
No, I suspect it's not properly defined. I suspect there are, okay, I've just been listening to Werner Herzog actually on the Adam Buxton podcast. He's done a film about, or a documentary at least, or a book, sorry, a book about that Japanese soldier who fought for 29 years past the end of the
Hmm.
Second World War.
Hmm.
And for him, that war lasted 29 years. He saw planes going over in the South Korea War. He saw um, American battleships going towards Vietnam. For him,
Hmm.
that was part of the Second World War. Like,
Hmm.
when did the Second World War end? Well, it ended in Europe at one point. Ended in, some people say it ended with the second bomb that dropped on Japan, but actually there were still firebomb attacks in Japan after that. Like,
Hmm.
what date do you put down that the war ended? Because it's different for different people. So, but yeah, you've got loads of stuff. That the hunt for the fallen starts. The whole exterminatus of various worlds associated with traitors. Um, they've put Guilliman and Fulgrim, the Battle of Thalassia, as part of the Scouring. So yeah, the
The
Scouring could
Scouring is
be.
actually an enormous period, I think,
Yeah.
given the number of events that take place.
So yeah, which gives them a huge amount of time. Um, Obviously, it's not as contracted as the Heresy, you know. Um,
No.
so I mean, that gives them another 20 years of books if they want it, like
Yeah.
really easily. Salamanders under Vulcan, hunt down with habeas bile. That sounds like a great.
Would people follow it in the same way? Whereas the heresy, you knew there was an end point,
Well, I
and
think
people were keen to reach it.
I,
Some the people wanted to see the narrative move on in a way. I remember the
I
discussions of that being had at the
so
time. Would you be people worried that it would just be too open ended with
well
the scouring?
they don't have to do the Scouring as one big series.
No.
They can do the Scouring X, the Scouring X. So the
Mm,
Scouring could become like the Heresy isn't over. The Heresy numbered book series is over.
mm,
So there's no reason why you couldn't have multiple series set in the Scouring. I don't know. I
mm,
don't know how they're doing it. You know, or if they're doing it. Mm. Um, but I suspect we'll find out in a couple of weeks when we have, or end of the week, some point this week,
mm,
um, for Black Library celebration. I'd be amazed if they don't, but maybe they do. Yeah, Alpharis / Omegon. You know, Jagato Khan disappearing. Kurs. I mean, we know how he dies, but there might be more that he's up to. He's got to be found for stars.
mm, mm.
Yeah, plenty of stuff. Plenty of stuff. So that's that one. So yeah, because the Scouring was followed by the Age of Rebirth. There's not much about that. Cool. Okay. So next question. That was all the Instagram stuff. So let's crack on. I'm not going to answer silly questions, and that's just because I'm a boring old git. So biggest highlights of the FAQ. What are those? This is at Sashmaster on Twitter.
Oof.
I don't really know. We covered kind of a few things. I suppose highlights. They took a very offensive unit down a peg or two with the old Terminators, didn't they?
Yeah, I felt
Like
that was the standout
it's
thing for me. I mean, it was
significant,
the one
whether
that
it's
people talked about the most.
yeah,
I feel the other things, the actual parts of the FAQ, I didn't feel there was anything hugely significant, really.
yeah. I was
But the sweep of it, I mean, the highlight for me was the sweep of it. If that's a bit of a
yeah.
cop
It's
out,
quite a lot.
perhaps, I'm quite impressed that they did that. They did go quite broad. They went across everything. I mean, I would have thought they'd have done. Oh, we've just updated the core and perhaps the
I think
two Libra Astartes books. But
maybe
actually, no, they went across the board, which I was quite impressed with, including legacy books,
maybe a
legacy
little
details.
bit of the tidying up of the psychic powers and the way they work with reactions and things.
Mm,
I think that was one of the few things that was like, oh, they went that way with it. That's cool. Whereas a lot of stuff seemed to be um, either confirmation or, okay, cool, we just needed that answered. We thought it was going to be that. But
mm.
it definitely did need an answer. So I don't think it's, yeah, I think it was a generally good FAQ that could have gone further, could have answered more. But um,
It's a rare
yeah,
FAQ where people don't say that.
yeah, were there any really, I don't think there were any shockers. Like every now
There
and then we
weren't.
get a
There weren't.
shocker.
I think we would remember them if there were. I don't remember anything being anything hugely significant
No.
in the FAQ, but I do remember being surprised at how many publications it touched. Or
Yeah.
they dealt with in one single pass. I thought was significant, and the standout thing being they did reduce the significance of some of the more
I suppose
or what was seen to be overpowered units, which I think probably
one
were.
one significant thing was not allowing the corrupted uh, the Legions Hereticus to use regular rights of war. I think that's significant and disappointingly significant because
Mm,
I think it affects how many of them we're going to see, which is okie
mm.
dokie. At TastyPanda9666 on Twitter, a wish list for 2024 in Horus Heresy. super cool campaign, but I just like we've got. I just want them to carry on doing what they're doing. I want them to have the roadmap they stick to.
Roadmap would be good. A roadmap,
Yeah,
an updated roadmap would be nice.
which I think we'll get. It's interesting now. We've had confirmation since we started. So we're a bit late with this one and timescales and everything else. But basically, we've had confirmation of no Warhammer Fest this year, which is not surprising. Heard about it last year, and yeah, whatever. I still think they'll do something online. They'll have a big reveal on whatever, and that was the time that we got the roadmap. So hoping for the roadmap about May.
Yes, whether they do it as a single event that covers a whole bunch of their game systems, or whether they spread them out over.
I think they'll spread them out over
do
a
that.
week.
I think they will. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think it'll be more than that. I think it'll be over a longer period where they'll do.
Yeah, maybe.
Whatever they'll do focuses on certain events, but whatever. Yeah, I think they'll do something. I don't think they'll try and make it a Fest online. Well, maybe they will. Who knows?
I think they will because they still had those reveals at Nova, Adepticon, LVO. Like all those were still and the random odd ones they had anyway. So I still think I think they still should have, or maybe they just use the Warhammer Day as a bigger thing. No, I don't think they will.
I think you could follow the sort of COVID years format where they say, well, we can't do it, so we'll do it online instead, and they'll just do it that way.
But yeah,
I think they'll do that, and a roadmap would be good. Breaches would be good.
Yeah, breaches. I just think more of the same. Like they're on the right path. If you just play Heresy only, I can see that you might be a little bit fed up with the lack of or the perceived lack of new stuff. But if you play multiple game systems, the pace seems fine. Okay, a wish list for 2024. I've got it. There is one big thing: Adeptus Titanicus 2. Don't think it's going to happen, but I want a nicer rulebook. I think if you've got the game, I also Adeptus Titanicus 2 with a new chassis.
Yes, and I think you're right. Having read a lot more of Legions, and then sort of going back and looking at the way that book was produced, I think it was great at the time. But I think the Titanicus book, I feel like it could just be made more contemporary and sharpened up considerably.
Yeah. There's a few few that need looking at. There's a redistribution of points. There's a few changes to things like Warbringer that would make the game a lot better without being major changes. I don't think they need major changes, but I do think there are plenty of changes that could be made. I say plenty, enough changes that could be made to warrant a second edition of the book. Tidy up some of the weird stuff like warhounds leaping over tall buildings, that kind of thing, and bring out a chassis between the Reaver and the Warlord. The Reaver and the Warhound.
Yes.
And make it work for both game systems. Whether they're going to do it or not, I wouldn't put my £1 on it, but that's what I would want.
Make it work for both game systems. What do you mean?
Imperialis and AT. Which
the new chassis. Sorry, I thought you meant make Titanicus work for. Yeah, okay. No, that makes sense.
No. Titanicus should be its own game.
No, I completely agree. It doesn't work. Embedded one within the other.
We know there's another way of playing coming, and expect some more from us about that at some point. Okie dokie, let's move on. Facebook. Derek Ruff again. What do you prefer, playing games from books or what if games? So do you like playing historicals or whatever? I don't think anyone actually plays the games from the books because very extremely, I mean 0.0%. Because you need exact forces, you also need to make the same choices. Like they're all what if games to a point.
Well, funny you should say that, as I was going to say, I've played more of those types of games than I have the what if games. I played general pickup games where we just make up.
But even I suppose actually no, tell a lie. Yeah.
I mean, for example, I've played a number of the scenarios that are in the narrative scenarios that are in the Titanicus book.
That's fair. That's fair. With those exact forces.
Yes.
Okay, fair play. Yeah, no, you're right on that, and I'll take that back a little bit. I would say 90 odd percent of the games played are what if games.
Yes, or
Because
are
as soon as
generic.
you don't take the exact scenarios with the exact forces, then you've deviated and you're
But
making
there's
things up, and that's
there's
fine.
very
It's not a problem.
few. But there's very few um, scenarios or otherwise that dictate the forces. They
Yeah.
dictate the factions, but there's very few that say you will have 6 tactical squads. This
No,
this devastator squad is not that sort of thing, is it? It's
so you're
you
playing what
do you
if?
have
These are
Sons of
these
Horus
are the
Heresy?
forces I've chosen. That's a what if game because you're not following.
But well, there's nothing to follow.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it isn't a what if. Because you
Well, I mean, all of it
just
on that
just
basis, all of
because you
it's a
can't.
what if because it's not real. I mean, that's a strange
No, yeah,
extension of the logic.
no. Well,
I
I'm gonna
don't think
fight.
that's
I'm gonna
quite
fight the
right.
Urgal depression, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, are you fighting the Urgal depression with the forces that were there? No. Then you're
I think the
fighting
nature of
a version
I
of the
think
Urgal depression,
yeah,
which is
okay.
not the
I think
Urgal depression.
I would have thought that the intent of the question is I've played a version of File, but instead of the Imperial Fist, it's Ultramarines.
And that's a what if.
Exactly. That's what I would say is
Okay.
that's what a what if is in the Marvel, the recent Marvel series version of it. Of that, let's take something we know
Okay, but
and
even then,
switch out something.
okay, even then, any made up scenario, any any force, any made up scenario, any made up planet is a what if. Any made up, anything that's vaguely made up is a what if, um, because it's not following the diktats of what is explicitly stated.
I think that's a too literal
Well, I
interpretation
think
of it,
it's an important
personally.
one because I think people get very caught up on, well, that's not allowed, and that's not allowed. And it's like, well, hold on, most of the games we play are not explicit what happened,
Yes.
and therefore, because you do get to where you can't take Ferris. It's like, well, no one could ever take Ferris. Oh, we're playing historical. Well, okay, cool. Take half your army off Mr. Ironhand's play. You can have some broken legions, you know,
Yeah.
like and it becomes I don't know. Recently, I haven't seen it so much, but it did become a thing for a while, where it was like, we are playing, we're playing historically, we're playing a in-universe historical, but like fight. And it's like, okay, cool, right? Well, so the Thousand Suns aren't going to be anywhere near it then, because
Mm.
uh, you know, okay, small amounts are and whatever. But if you're going to follow what you know, then they
Mm.
did sweet FA apart from um, uh, fight on Prospero, lose, break someone out of a prison, a handful of them, and not even properly fight on Terra. Like most of the Legion did their own thing.
Yeah, there's the odd mention, isn't there? But they comes in
Yeah,
much later. Aren't they
I
at
think it's,
Yarrant? They do something at Yarrant, don't they? There's a
yeah,
force turns
probably.
up with them. You know,
Yeah, and we
there
know
are forces all
there's a
around. But,
handful on
mm.
Cathonia now, but we only like that only
Oh yeah.
becomes that's only recently become a
Yeah, agreed.
historical thing. Like until
Mm.
then, everyone would have said they're not on Cathonia.
Mm.
Definitely
Mm.
not. So that's what I'm saying. I think the game benefits from just accepting the fact that most of your games are not historically accurate and just being a bit like, cool, crack on. Like it's not a problem.
Yeah, okay, I get that. I think I was
Mm.
reacting. Yeah, I see where you're coming from now, and I take that
I
point
get what
more.
you mean, and I was over
I
harsh.
thought I thought you were sort of saying what you basically can't have. I won't allow you to play a historic game or whatever. You think, well, yes, you can.
Mm.
You can do it that way, but actually, you're saying broaden the spectrum of
Yeah,
what you allow yourself to do.
and remove the stigma of it not being
Agree.
historically accurate
Yeah.
because almost every game we play is not historically accurate. So
Yes,
cool.
and
Just don't worry about it.
I was taking that as a given, but you're
Yeah.
absolutely right to highlight it because I think that could prevent people doing something.
Because it does. I see people say, "Well, I can't take that character because he wasn't around," or why have you got them? They were, why have you got Thousand Sons? They were all at Prospero. It's like, well, no, they weren't. When it says they were all at Prospero, that means a vast percentage of the Legion. 3% of that Legion not being at Prospero is a lot of
Mm,
people, and it
mm,
does say there weren't some and all that, but it just It just means, when people say in Titanic, it's, what Legio do I play? I want to play Traitors. Cool. Well, you've got every Legio to choose from then.
Yeah, there's
Like,
there's a few
because
things as
people,
well
mm,
where there's things that have been established that are going to go a different way.
yeah,
Then they realise, well, let's expand that because there's a short story I believe from obviously from Black Library that says that deals with the blood angels that are left at Baal while all the rest go to Cygnus,
yes,
like
yeah.
mostly. And it's oh, there's a squad that they've left, and it's like 10 guys, 20 guys. And you're like, well, I don't feel quite right, but okay, well, let's go with it for the sake of the story. There's more recent publications are showing in the timeline. There's the siege of Baal, and there's actually the Baal takes in a load of survivors from
Mm.
Isfahan, and there's actually a big company there. It's actually not a squad; it's a company.
Also,
So it expands,
yeah.
doesn't it? It
Also, it's a seven
expands
and a
to be
half year
logical.
period. So,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. At one point, it was this. Yeah.
yeah. And this is what I mean by, like,
How can you get it all to be true? And
yeah.
that's what you're working to try and do.
And
Yeah, I
the
agree.
story you're playing, which you're making historically accurate,
Mm,
is always told from a viewpoint which might not be
mm,
accurate. Unreliable narrator is a huge thing. Like, we'll get
hmm
onto that later as well. Anyway, let's crack on. Which character from the lore would you love to have a model and rules for, and why? Well, we're getting them. I think it's Shadrach Bloody Medusa.
Yes. I think that is quite a cool one,
I
actually.
think he's the only one who gets basically sworn at by Horus. So, like, there's pretty much no cooler person than him in the whole of the universe. So, yeah.
Yeah, he is very appealing, isn't he?
Although I would love to see Sam do the Emperor, but it will happen one day. Cool.
Oh yeah, that would just to see what they do with that as a model.
Exactly.
That would be unbelievable. All right, let's rattle
That
through 'em.
was Simon Whitehouse. Sorry, Matt Wood Smith, familiar name. How cool would a force themed around the teleporter sort of Horace's battle barge be, and how would you model that force? Well, looking at the new information we have, you could just take a shed load of Blood Angels, um,
Shed loads of Imperial fists.
shed loads of Imperial Fists.
Wouldn't be. Yeah,
Yeah, there's not. It's not as again. That's not as restrictive as it once was.
no.
A handful of custodies.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, quite a few to be fair, with Valdor leading them. Uh, how would you model them? Well, again, the vengeful spirit is everywhere at that point, so you
Just
you could
creating
you could just do
creating
whatever you want.
some of the
Yeah,
scenarios around that.
yeah. I
Oh
think
wow, actually, now I'm thinking about it. That's something in particular.
you
Custodies. Oof, there'd be some fun games there where you've got custodies on.
so
Yeah, that would be really fun.
for an actual force to play games with, to fight with, and to look good and to represent that force, I think I would only choose Blood Angels, and I would just reread those sections when the doors are shut and they have
Hmm
to get them open enough for Sanguinius to get in, and I would look through there and just read, and I think anything goes pretty much from that within
hmm
within the choices of what you can take. But it's all infantry for starters. Cool. Um, uh, but you can have jetpacks, you can have Terminators, you can have lots of stuff in there. So
I would also. I think the custodies force would be quite fun because they actually are. There's a point where they're virtually all. You could have a force where they're all named.
yeah,
You
true.
could go with the higher end kind of the
Yeah,
real heavy and super elite characters, or the Heterion Guard kind of characters,
it
all
was very
tribunes and that
elite,
sort of thing.
wasn't it?
Oh, it's
Yeah.
hyper elite, and you could go down that route where you've got
No
actually they're
dreads.
all named here. No,
I think you're a little bit limited for a
you're
playable
pretty much
force in
limited to
that.
Aquilons and
Yeah, Heritarians and all
Heterions,
those.
and that's
Yeah.
about it actually,
Yeah, so
and
you can't have
and
the
tribunes
core.
and things.
I think the Blood Angels allows you to take, maybe not necessarily heavy weapons, but allows you to take specialist weapons. So
Mm,
you've got a chance of taking out vehicles and things like that. So it becomes a bit
mm,
more of a playable forcing game. But
mm.
that's what I would do. Cool. Daniel Williams, if you could change one and only one character's arc, who would it be and why? One
Mm.
character's arc.
That's hard because a lot of the arcs are quite
See,
satisfying.
this is it. So,
But you would rather see
who's
more
the
of them
White
or something
Scar
like that.
who Abaddon finishes off? He charges through in the Solar War. He charges through the
Yes, I know
ship
who you
to
mean.
assassinate, and he comes very close to it. Like a lot of people would change that, but I'm like, no, I think that's an amazing end for him. I think
Yeah.
it's super cool. I'm tempted to say Shadrach Meduson because, or maybe I don't know. I think yeah, okay. So if I've changed his arc, I change the whole of the future of the Iron Hands, and I don't
Yeah.
like the Iron Hands. So
No.
yes, Meduson survives. Doesn't get stabbed in the back, and the Iron Hands become more useful as a force, but also adapt slightly and become less dull
Mm,
as
mm.
characters.
I'm trying to think of someone who I'm tempted to say it's one of the Ultramarines characters.
Yeah,
People like Marius Gage. There's a few characters like that that just sort of
he does.
they
Gage
fizzle
just
out a little bit.
was he last seen in the comic Gage?
I think he was, and there's kind of I
Yeah,
think, oh, it's a
because the
shame.
comic kind of doesn't. I'm trying to remember. It's been a long time since I read it. Just kind of ends, and those people don't really do huge amounts. Obviously, Guilliman gets back and what have you, but
Well,
yeah,
like
they're not
Corfeiron
handed
kind of
with.
just goes that way. It doesn't. Corfeiron doesn't know a great deal after
Yeah,
that.
well see this is
It
where
doesn't it Marius Gage and Corfeiron disappear into the war,
yeah maybe,
and
but
that's kind of
Corferin,
it. But then they do come back, and you're like, well,
his story particularly, like you
mm,
feel is more suited to the scouring,
mm, mm,
and well, and the whole of the word bearers. So that's an interesting one. Okay, yeah, either of those could work actually. I see what you mean with that.
mm.
Cool. We're going to miss a couple of questions there. Chris Key, with regards to Legions Imperialis, do you think we'll see special character and units? What other areas of the heresy would you like to see after the end of the death? We've covered that bit. Would I like to see? I'd like to see the scouring because there's a lot of stories to be told that are heresy stories that need to be
Yes.
don't need not every story needs to be tied up, but there are plenty of stories that deserve some more in that.
I think that interaction of the different characters in the post
Yeah,
heresy world is what's most appealing.
yeah,
How are they dealing with what's just transpired, knowing that they have to continue?
yeah,
And this idea that you're then trying to build, and the weight of responsibility that suddenly kicks in, and actually, what have we lost, and what are we doing? Oh, and by the way, and then also seeing the traitors come apart or
yeah.
carrying on a trajectory they were already kind of on and were held
Sure.
together by something that's shattered. So there's enough there before you start talking. And actually, us having this conversation has made me realize how much is technically, if you want to put it that way, in the Great Scouring. There's
Yeah,
actually some pretty
because
significant moments in it,
yeah, this is it.
formative
Like
moments.
the heresy ends at a point when there's a psychic awareness of the fact of the events that have happened, but
Mm,
there's no that is the end of the heresy. Like it's over at that point.
mm,
But yeah, that doesn't allow any time for anyone to deal with what's happened. So yeah, regards to special character and units, I think we will see a simple form of things like that in the end. I think we'll see uh, Primarchs. Um, I don't think there'll be like full on things. It will be a small bonus here and there, but I can't imagine you don't get Angron in full demon mode and
yeah.
things like that.
Just because they particularly demon primarchs,
Mm,
their first version, their first
yeah,
incantation was in Epic.
yeah,
So it feels like a fairly obvious thing to kind of swing back round and do, along
yeah.
with greater demons and things. And demons could potentially be an
Um,
interesting one. But
uh,
I don't think we'll see Legion specific units per
well, I
se.
think we will. I think we'll see the Tormentor. I think we'll see potentially
Okay,
Baal Predators.
I don't think you'll see
Oh no,
Legion
maybe not.
specific
It's too
infantry.
much. It's too much. Yeah, yeah. It seems like it's too low of a scale. Just paint your dudes. Like I think there might be rules that allow you to upgrade an
Mm.
entry or something like that, but
And
making models for them.
the level of
Yeah,
detail they've
tighten the
got in the
stat out.
models sort of allows for it.
Yeah, you
However,
can.
I just don't think you'll
Yeah,
have the. They just won't have the space
no, but
in the codes. You know, they won't have the space in the inventory to maintain
yeah, I
that
could see
range.
in the end either having Legion specific formations or a rule to allow, say, okay, Blood Angels, Assault Marines get +1 CAF
Yeah,
in this if you pay this points to upgrade them, something
yeah.
like that
If you play this
to
formation
represent. Yeah,
very
yeah.
specifically, this yeah, there'll be
Like
variations of rules. Although
I
that
wouldn't.
said, now I'm thinking about it, you could do an infantry sprue. You could do a legion specific sprue.
Yes, you could
Actually,
actually. That would be work really well with two or
you could.
three different unit types on it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would work really well.
18 sprues, and you've got legion specific sprues that would then mix in really well.
Yeah,
Actually, that could work a treat.
yeah. So
You do that in plastic, and there'd probably be enough
yeah. So yeah,
purchase to be
Iron
able to do
Warriors,
that.
you get some Terminators, some heavy weapons dudes, and
Mm-hmm.
something else. Yeah, your Blood Angels, you get Assault Marines,
Well,
and
think about it. For virtually all the legions have got one or two power armor units
yeah, and
and
the
a
Terminator
Legion
unit. Yeah,
Terminator unit. You put
yeah, you
that
could easily
on
do that.
your on one frame, two of those frames.
Yeah,
As long as you've
that,
got four Terminators and four bases each of the two types of power armor,
something like that. Yeah, or yeah,
you know.
variations on, and and
Mm,
and you know what? Actually, then you could get turrets to adapt your
mm-hmm,
battle
mm-hmm.
predators, things like that, without having to release a whole new sprue for the
I think
tanks.
that's how you do it, and I think that's a possibility.
That would be a really good idea, actually.
I
Cool.
don't think I think you'd see
I
Primarch as a resin.
Yeah, I think I put it this way. I, it's at that point where it would be cool. I wouldn't be surprised if they did it. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't do it. So
Mm, mm.
cool. Okay, Ian Webber. What is the one rule you would change and why, and how would you change it? Don't know. One rule. The problem with any question like this, so a lot of people will say deep striking is too powerful. I would do this, and it's like, oh, sorry, over not interceptor's too
Interceptor. Mm,
powerful. I would do this, and I'm like, cool. So you've changed interceptor, brilliant. Right, now deep striking is too powerful because you can charge out deep strike, or outflanking is too powerful, or what have you.
mm.
So you've either got to be subtle, or you've got to change more than one thing. Um, I
I
don't
do.
know.
I mean,
I
I don't
think
know if this
maybe the
counts.
go
Carry
for
on.
it.
Yep.
No, you go for it.
I don't know if this counts, but it was a conversation I was having with a group of people the other day about knights
Yeah,
because I picked up a knight the other day, and I was just discussing that becoming a bigger force of knights. And one of the biggest issues with them was that their close combat weapons aren't particularly. I mean,
yeah,
the knights weren't that threatening. Their close combat weapons, in particular, not having brutal and not being that threatening. They're kind of significant, but they're not like scary in the way that the points of a knight kind of suggest. Someone suggested give them destroyer, makes them scary. But is that too scary? I don't know. I feel like that's a sort of. It's not one rule I would change, but
no,
it's
it's
something you
not.
could
Yeah,
apply. So I don't think it really counts. But it's. I feel like that's a change that could happen that would apply to one weapon type. It's about as close as I can get to changing one
yeah.
rule.
So I don't think
Because
there's.
otherwise, I think changing one rule almost feels too significant.
Yeah,
That sounds
exactly.
like a small request, but it's actually a massive
Yeah.
mechanical
So
change.
so Ian Ho, do you think reactions are good for the game? Should they be turned down a little, or Overwatch be BS1? Thoughts? I I might choose reactions to this answer to combine those
Oh,
two
wow.
issues.
Really?
Um, but again, I think reactions are good.
I completely agree. I think they were
I
a really
think
good
there
thing that
are
happened to the
some
game.
issues with how they interact in game. Like as a guy who could play a Space Wolves army that is all about running and charging, yes, you should have a counter to stop me being able to run and charge you. Should that counter mean that I never shoot my pistols? Because why do I
Mm,
want to shoot and give you a chance to kill me when you've already got a chance to kill me from if I charge you,
mm,
as well as
mm.
your normal shooting attack? Um, you know, so yeah, there's a Reactions are good. Interceptor being a major part of this as well. How they're utilised, I'm not sure how we would change it, but it's a really tricky one. I think they're cool, no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the janky stuff you can do can be a bit interesting, shall we say, with them.
It adds a certain complexity as well when you've got the number of
Yeah,
different reactions and trying to keep track of like what legion can do what again.
yeah,
But I feel like it's just on the right side of manageable, more so than it was, say, with 40K's previous edition and its number of stratagems and things that you could introduce
yeah,
and
yeah. It's
number of different.
certainly
And it was like
manageable,
I've got 40 different stratagems that any one faction could do, so I can't.
but
Impossible to keep track of that.
if you've got a 10-man las cannon team that, and there are ways to play around it, and maybe it's I don't know. There's ways you can limit like the range they work on,
Mm,
like whether there's a negative modifier to hit for particularly some of the shooting, because it's generally the shooting reactions. Like the hold the line one's a really interesting one. It's not necessarily bad, but again, if you it affects the way armies are built, and it affects some armies more than others. It affects some
Could
play styles more than others.
you be more dramatic and say you are limited to a set number of reactions in its entirety over the turn, rather than I've got
Yeah,
one
you
in each
could.
phase? You could say
Yeah,
I've got two that I can use ever.
you could. However, do you just see them the same ones used every time then? Well, I'll save
Probably.
it for my shooting reaction because if you shoot my 10-man las cannon squad, then I'm going to shoot you
Mm,
back. But and sometimes it's not the reaction or it's not the initial rule that's the problem. It's are there ways to handle around it? And there can be. Sometimes you've got to mix your army up a little bit. And there are lots of things in the game. Like this is not a game designed for tournaments. Much like the old world, and I think a lot of people very soon are going to discover that the old world has issues to be a lot of issues that need to be covered when playing it in a tournament style.
mm,
Uh, a lot of those issues that then get resolved if you just agree to Wheaton's law and cool, you know what? This is really good. So, and I know that you don't play kind of that kind of game. I'm not going to take my whatever on a dragon. I'm going to tone that down. I'm going to take this, but still need enough punch to be able to deal with
mm.
your unit, right? And that aspect solves a lot of things. How easy is it to do that? Well, listen to other podcasts, people who are nice people, who are generally good people, who struggle to tone down lists because
Mm,
they don't see a problem with it. When you can talk about like having, I don't know how many Raven Guard, like, snipers in a list, having rules to like our Alpha Legion can do this where they can ignore, just by taking a Primarch, you can ignore certain aspects of the rules that limit snipers, but, or you build into, I don't know, other different ways around lots of different things. There is you can't without really tightening the rule set and losing aspects. You end up having to be able to manage the games.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know.
It's an interesting
Reaction
question
somewhere.
because it's really tricky. Yeah,
But I
but
don't.
that's
The
perhaps.
problem is, it's a reductive question, and that's not a negative about the question. It's one of those questions that you kind of ask. You can't ask what would you change in the game, like 18 million different things. But it can never just be one. It can never just be one change.
Mm,
Like
mm,
unless you're going to come up with a silly answer and say, within, uh, I don't know, the lion should be much worse than he is because you just should. So yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
one more. Matt Wood Smith. Also, how do we feel about Legions Imperialis having an all Titans all the time mode? Does it do anything that Titanicus doesn't already do? Well, we'll have to look at the book to know exactly what's going on. But the one thing about Titanicus, so if it follows roughly the Legions Imperialis Titan rules and Knight rules, because Knights are allowed and things like that, then it simplifies the game tenfold. Yeah,
Mm, mm.
compared to Titanicus. Therefore, you can put 20 Titans down in theory onto a table with a super simplified rule set and have a good time. I don't think you can do that with Titanicus.
Agreed. You definitely can't. Well, you
And,
you
well, you
can, but it
could,
becomes an exercise. It becomes an exercise in management. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you could have I think what you could do and what could be really amazing if you have this super simplified game is you could have an apocalypse type
Yeah.
Titanicus game with 12 players on each side under that rule set, and you could potentially have fun with that. You can't do that with Titanicus. Be unmanageable. So is there a place for it? I'm sure there will be. I think it potentially will encourage people to buy more Titans, which so it works for GW as well. But we shall have to see
and
exactly how it's
and
going to
it's
work.
been around so long enough that people have built up reasonably large collections of
Yeah,
Titans. You get a few people together who have got a few of those, and you've got a really interesting game. I mean, to the most extreme example of that, you've got Forge of Mars and his 150 Titans at Warhammer
yeah.
World. You've got
Could take
people who've got
150 Titans to a
collections,
game. Mm.
and it allows you to play in that game. The Apocalypse analogy, I think, is a good one because it. Having not played more recent editions of Apocalypse, but the idea that you can put stuff down and play it in a game, which you just can't do. The
Yeah.
idea that it's somehow a replacement or in somehow
No.
competing with Titanicus, I think, is wrong
The
based
other
on what
thing,
we've seen.
yeah, the other thing it could do is if it's super simplified, you could take a mana pool, like maybe 7 Titans, which you could take in 80 quite easily. You could have 7 Titans in a 1750,
Hmm.
1850 force. You could do the same in Legions Imperialis with that time rules, and if the rules are simpler, you could play it in half the time.
Mm.
So it
Hmm.
allows you a different kind of. We've got 2 hours. Cool. Let's not play AT because we need 3 hours. Let's play this. We can get our times
Yes,
out and play a fun game.
a fundamentally different game,
Yeah, just a fun game.
but fun one. Yeah,
Yeah,
but a fun one
exactly.
nonetheless. Yeah.
So and,
So I
and
think there's space for both. Yeah.
oh, big time. Yeah, potentially. And for me, long term, I'm probably going to want a deeper game, but
Mm.
um,
But I like
that
the idea
doesn't
of
mean
having
that.
options
Yeah,
for both. Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
exactly. Yeah, if you're playing, Saturday night at an event, that kind of thing,
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it'll be, when your brain's a bit frazzled.
It's perfect for that actually. If you've got a bunch of
Yeah.
people, yeah. If that would be really good if the timings had worked out, wouldn't it? But yeah, if there was a bunch of people playing a Titanicus event who had loads of Titans in place and wanted something to do where they could bring them all together,
Mm,
then you've got a game, haven't you?
yeah. Cool. Let's cut that there. And you have made it to the end of another episode of the Imperial Truth. Thank you for listening. As you may have guessed, we failed to get the End of the Death recording in time bypassed us, partly because of how long the FAQ segment became, because we can't regulate how much we talk, which is, as you can probably guess, pretty standard. We may have been able to do it if we weren't getting ready for Beachhead, but I want to get this out.